That was too close. You were almost a Jill sandwich.
Yes, I'm Rebecca. Rebecca Chambers.
Your right hand comes off, and the world will burn in an inferno of hate.
7 minutes. 7 minutes is all I can spare to play with you.
Chris? Leon? If you see one of those things, uniform or not, you do not hesitate. Get off my tail. Shit's burned up.
Welcome to the family, son.
This place. Raccoon City was where it all began for me. Where it all happened, I couldn't make a difference. So I am here now.
Hello everybody, we're here back with another video, and today we are going to be ranking every Resident Evil game that I have played. I've played all the mainline games, some spin-off games, and I figure, yeah, let's just get right into it. It's based off how the quality and favoritism, in my opinion, so just how well I think the games are made, I guess. And yeah, I did an initial tier list for the Resident Evil series like a few years back. You can go look at that if you want. My opinions have changed a lot. I've replayed pretty much all the games. I've played many more games. And yeah, I just beat Resident Evil 9 2 weeks ago. I wanted to let it simmer a little bit, and now let's just get straight into this. I'm very excited because I love this series. Resident Evil 1. That's where we're getting the very start. Resident Evil 1 is kind of like, in my opinion, it's a solid A tier game. The game that started it all. And this game just does so many things right. I played this game on my just PS5. It released on the PS5. I was like, oh, perfect opportunity. Game's really short, but it's short and sweet. The game's also really, really easy, which I'm not the biggest fan of. I think Resident Evil games are kind of made to perfect difficulty. And when they don't, it doesn't come off as a great survival horror experience. Resident Evil 1, I'm going to give it some slack because it's the first Resident Evil game, which is why I'm not tearing it apart. And overall, just as the first game in the series, it is just phenomenal. The way it sets up the stories, the way it sets up the characters, the way the mansion is laid out is phenomenal. Despite the colorful nature of this game, it still feels a little scary. And something I noticed playing this game, because I played this game after I played pretty much every other mainline title in the series, I noticed that the game feels a little bit dead. And I say dead because, not as like play on words or a pun, the game, because it doesn't have like any like bioweapon and like big tyrant like enemy until the end, it kind of feels empty, I guess. Like when you're going around the mansion, it's like, oh well, there's a zombie. Of course you come back and there's hunters, but it feels like it needs a little bit more oomph to push it forward. But I mean, overall, Resident Evil 1 is just a phenomenal start to this incredible series. And crazy enough, the game was remade like 6 years later, and I'm just gonna be straight, setting the tone for this tier list. Resident Evil 1 Remake is one of the best games ever made. It is the only horror game I have played that has given me anxiety and or fear. Usually when I play games, I have to get in a mindset to where I have to allow myself to be scared, or else I'm just not scared, right? I'll be like, oh, he's right behind me, and it's a little bit worrisome, but I never feel real fear when I play games. Resident Evil 1 Remake changed this. I played, this was the first, I think this was the first fixed camera angle game I played. It might have been the second. I don't know if I played 0 or 1 first. And just overall, after playing the first game as well, this game takes every single thing the first game did right and amplified it, while also taking everything the first game did wrong and amplifies it. I mentioned that the first game felt a little bit dead, how it needed an extra oomph. This game has that. And it's not just being like, oh wow, the atmosphere of the game is much better. Lisa Trevor is genuinely one of the most impressive and impactful enemies in the entire series. Playing Resident Evil 1 without Lisa Trevor felt like a completely different experience. Just the aura and vibe that this bioweapon gives off genuinely changes how you go about the game and think about the game and view the game's story. If you really get into the thick of it with Lisa Trevor, the way the world is built up and the way they present her is so disturbing, but it's not disturbing in a way that's just like, wow, it's too much. It's not like Outlast where they have a bunch of dead babies to scare you. It's not like Saw where it's like torture. The game plays on this fine line of being just enough to where it is horrifying without going too far where it feels extreme. And this can be said about the entire game. Every single room is designed with such meaningful just atmosphere, colors. Each room being just a 2D image basically is fascinating. The lighting in this game, the graphics in this game for 2001 is crazy. I played the PS4 edition. I do have the GameCube edition, and I went and played the GameCube a little bit just to see the feel, and no matter, both versions are phenomenal. And the GameCube version does look a little bit better in my opinion just because the lower resolution fits with the game a bit more. But overall, I mean, this game is just phenomenal. Like I said, I have one complaint with this game. We'll get into that later. Just the way that the characters interact. And this is also being said about Resident Evil 1. Because I want to do these as kind of like a comparison between the two, which is why I have it laid out how I do. The way that both of these games have an interactive story is fascinating. How what you do in the game determines what story cutscenes you're going to get is awesome. I was looking into the original Resident Evil 1. The way that there's like a golden tyrant is just fascinating. Just the amount of different things that you can get in these games, different cutscenes, I have not seen them all. And that is just awesome to think about. I mean, there's 6 different endings in these games, and both of these games set the standard for what this series needs to be. So many times in this series, we feel kind of lost. The game is kind of struggling. The games are kind of struggling for an identity. Wow. These games create that identity. And I'm not saying that just because of the first game in the series, but Resident Evil 1 takes the survival horror concept, creates the perfect atmosphere. I'm talking about the remake. Creates the perfect atmosphere, creates the perfect set of enemies, creates the perfect story, and it creates the perfect difficulty experience. Resident Evil 1 original, you kill a zombie and that's it. And like I said, the game felt very easy. And that easiness just kind of makes you less scared. Resident Evil 1 Remake, when I played this game, I had a tough time. Zombies take, like, on easy mode, like 12 to 13 bullets to kill, which is crazy to think about. And not only that, if you don't blow a zombie's head off, the fact that it can come back later as a stronger zombie, that is fascinating. And that is a concept I wish they explored a little bit more with the T-Virus. The Crimson Heads are one of the scariest aspects about this game, and it really makes you think. It adds an extra layer to every single action that you make. If I kill this zombie in this hallway, am I going to get lucky enough to either blow its head off, or will I have enough gasoline to burn the corpse? It adds an extra layer to how you move around this mansion, what areas in this mansion you want to make safe. That way you can traverse the mansion without dying, of course. The game comes together in such a great experience where you're always thinking about what you're going to do next. Even if you haven't figured out the puzzles, even if you're just exploring, you're always thinking about how is what I'm going to do going to affect the future of this game. And for that reason, that's why this game gave me so much anxiety. Every action I felt like was monumental for what I was doing. When I first played this game, I played it on easy mode. I love how the game presents difficulties. Oh, it's like climbing a hill, riding a bike. That is just so fun to me, where it doesn't explicitly say what difficulty is which, and the game has so much, again, aura just around it, where it's just like you load the game and it says you are entering the world of survivor horror, and it gives you all these notes and stuff. That is so awesome. And you have the intro cutscene where the zombie rises, gets shot in the head. It just sets you into the world so well, in a way that, in my opinion, is mostly not captured in the rest of the series. And I say mostly, we'll get there. But I mean, overall, this game is just phenomenal. And like I said, I have one small flaw with this game, and I mean that in when I'm comparing the two. Where I said, I gave you my take about Resident Evil 1, Resident Evil Remake. Resident Evil Remake does one thing a little bit worse in my opinion, and that is in the greenhouse, where you fight Plant 43. In the original game, you have the hallway from the save room into the greater area of the greenhouse, and you have to there's this little gap in the floorboards where the plant can attack you. And I thought this was really interesting because it kind of sets in stone that you only want to go back to the save room so many times, so you really got to think about how you traverse this greenhouse. In the remake, you can kind of just, they add a box there that you can just push on it, and I feel like that takes away from the overall puzzle and stress about that. And it's not the biggest complaint. This is the minorest nitpick, but that's the only complaint I have with the game. And I mean, because the game is so perfect, it stands out a little bit. But I mean, overall, we compare the two games, the shark section. This shark section in the original game is balls. They're so easy to avoid. This makes it an entire event that is stressful and scary. And it just takes that and does it so many times. With the Megalodon, I forget its name. It's Olympian, Poseidon. It's one of them. It does it with Poseidon. It does it with the shark. It does it with the yawn. And it does it with just the tyrant as well. Everything just adds on to each other to become so unique, so different. Even when you play the rest of the series, Resident Evil 1, both of these versions feel so different and separated from the rest because it's not trying to be anything besides a good game. While every other game in the series is trying to be like Resident Evil 1 in a way. Moving on to a game that is kind of controversial, Resident Evil 0. I think this is the second fixed scammer game I ever played. I don't remember how I played Resident Evil 1 and 0. I played this shortly after Resident Evil 8, I think. And Resident Evil 8 was my third game in the series, right? And overall, what I have to say about Resident Evil 0, it's a controversial game, but I love Resident Evil 0, and I feel like that's not a take that is said enough. Resident Evil 0 is so hated on, and in fact, when I played this game, I was so shocked at how people responded to this game. I recorded 3 hours of footage. I wrote a full 30-minute script about why this game is severely underrated and why it deserves more credit than it actually gets. Unfortunately, I never had the time to really put together that video. However, I will just start by saying I love Resident Evil 0. It's not the perfect game. There's a reason why it's an A tier and not an S tier, of course, but it is a game that I feel like is worthy of the title Resident Evil. Resident Evil 0 is such a unique premise taking place before the first game. And I know that they had this idea since the N64, how Resident Evil 0 was originally supposed to be put on the N64. And I love how it explores the character of Rebecca Chambers. And I will say, the story of this game is here and there. The opera singing leech dude is okay, whatever. It's cool seeing Wesker and Birkin work together. And I really love Billy as a character, but I do agree with what everybody says. This game should have focused on Bravo Team and how they got to their places in Resident Evil 1, and that's what the game was kind of promising being a prequel, yet it doesn't do that kind of at all. That's just the story though. I do agree the story can be worked on. The gameplay though is the most divisive part of the game. When I first played this game, I was on the train, and to be fair, when I first played this game, I did not care for the train segment, which is a hot take, I feel like. But it didn't mesh well in my mind. The game just I don't know. For some reason, I think I think this was my first fixed camera angle game. I'm gonna settle on that now. And I think I was just still getting used to the fixed camera controls. The first part where it throws like a million zombies at you, I was just like, oh wow, I'm just getting ate up a ton. And it is constantly throwing things at you. Because I think, if I remember correctly, it's been a while since I played this one. You deal with a bunch of zombies and then the dogs just jump in. And it's just a lot to take in for one of your first experiences with fixed camera. And I think maybe that's why I didn't like it. I got off the train, I did the Scorpion boss, and the train, I have to say, this game looks better than Resident Evil 1, and it plays better than Resident Evil 1 in game feel standards, right? Resident Evil 1, you can tell, was kind of, like, it looks great, the game looks fantastic, but Resident Evil 0 takes the art style of Resident Evil 1 and kind of amplifies it into where it looks even better. The game feels more optimized, right? And I'm not going to say the atmosphere is better because of it, but the graphics of the game look phenomenal. And everyone's main complaint is you get off the train and then you're like, you have all these items and you have to go into the train and then bring the items back into I think it's like the military ground. I forget what specifically it's called, to the big mansion-like area of the game. And the fact that there's no item box, it forces you to backtrack a lot to get items. When I first played this game, I never found that to be an issue for me. I don't know if it was just because of how I played these games, where I always kind of kept core items in important areas. So whenever I needed them, most doors kind of just come back to the center areas. So I was able to just grab them. And then even moving from big area to big area, I didn't feel like that was much of an issue because, yeah, there's a lot of items that you cannot bring, of course. But there's a lot of items you can, and the new areas give you new items to play with. I'm pretty sure I played this one just on the normal difficulty, but I could be wrong. I've only played this game once, and it was like 5 years ago at this point. But I mean, overall, the gameplay part did not really bother me that much, and I love the idea of having two characters that you can switch between almost on a dime. I think it's really impressive how quickly you press triangle and you just switch between the two characters just like near instantly. I think that is pretty freaking awesome, and I love the cooperation we have between Billy and Rebecca because of that. I would have liked to see this idea in like a Resident Evil 1 where Chris and Jill are more intertwined in the story versus like two separate campaigns. But Resident Evil 1 is still fantastic. I love how Resident Evil 0 does this though, and it's very unique and it sets itself apart from the rest of the series. And then moving on to like the enemy design, which I think is kind of hit or miss in this game. Of course, we have regular zombies, right? A lot of people complain about the leech men in this game, where it's like you have to use the Molotov cocktails to get them. I think it's funny whenever you go into a room with a leech monster, it plays like that really extreme music that is only when the leech men are in the room. I think when I first played this, because it was so, like, fixed cameras were so new to me, I really enjoyed that cue. That was just like, oh, well, I know what to prepare for in this room. However, thinking about it now, it does kind of give away some of the surprises. Oh, you go into a room and you just automatically know what to expect based off you going in there. You can just turn around without really experiencing the design of the game. And I do see that as a kind of a flaw. And then, of course, the executioners in this game, everybody talks about the monkeys, where the monkeys just have a million health, they're really fast, they jump everywhere, and they do not work in a fixed camera angle setting. This is another thing I did not have an issue with. I simply did not kill the monkeys. I think I maybe killed one or two in my entire playthrough. Because of that, I knew about them going into the game though. And because I had that foresight, I just didn't bother touching them. And I think that really allowed me to, I don't know, have maybe a better experience with the game. If I play the game again, I'll probably experiment it a bit more. I have a lot of Resident Evil games at the top of my list to replay again, and 0 is one of them. I should definitely replay it again. And I mean, overall, I think the game flow is pretty good. I remember just the main military place, ground, whatever it is, being really interesting to explore. It's a watered down Spencer Mansion, I will say. And going back to the train, I do like the train a lot more now with some foresight and how that is so different from the rest of the series. And then you get to like another lab area, and I don't really remember much from the lab besides it being just like almost like RE1's lab, where it's, you know, more factorial. I remember the specific section on like the dam area where the giant frogs jump up, and I was like, wow, that's a really interesting enemy design. I thought that was pretty fun. The proto tyrant is just fun, and the final boss is also just like fun to me. I had a lot of fun with this game, and now getting to why it's only an A tier. Of course, the story issues are a big part of why it lays in A tier. The story is just not what it really needed to be, and the story also has no impact on the entire series. And this is kind of something I'm going to get into with the rest of the games, how side characters that are in these games just never show up again or are really mentioned, in my opinion. They're mentioned in maybe, I don't know, outside sources, outside games, outside movies, but not really in the series, so you never know how these characters are doing. I don't think we've gotten a single word of what Billy is doing or up to, and that is really unfortunate. And then this game has some areas where you can soft lock yourself, and because of that, that is why I put it in A tier. Soft locking is just purely horrible game design, and I do not like it. It is just bad, and I'll give you the example. And one of the times I almost got soft locked in this game was when I went into the church. I forgot what I was getting. I went in there as Rebecca with like mixed health. I got what I had to get, and I came back out, and there was like this giant bat boss. And this giant bat boss, like, for one, the design of the bosses in this game are very uninspired. They're just like big animals or big bats or big bats and big insects, and they're not really unique. They're just big bugs, which I think is kind of sad. I would like to see that explored further and maybe a remake. And the bat boss is just really difficult to kill, but I also had like, literally I had to be perfect when I killed this boss, or else I would just not be able to complete the game without having to replay like 2 hours of game. And personally, I think that is kind of poor game design. And this is something that is fixed in the modern games with adaptive difficulty, where it's really hard to soft lock yourself. But in Resident Evil 0, I found it more prevalent as a new player to the series, where in even like Resident Evil 1, it's harder to soft lock yourself than it is in this game. I saved inside that church once I had gotten that item, and that cooked me alive. And I remember struggling a lot on that game, and because of areas like that, moments like that, this game is an A tier, but I will say I love this game. Moving on to, well, my mouse is dead. All right, my mouse died, and that is kind of unfortunate, but I have a different mouse with us now. Moving on to the next game. This is kind of a loaded game to talk about. These next two are pretty loaded, so this might be a minute. Resident Evil 2. I played Resident Evil 2 Remake as my first real Resident Evil game by myself. Prior to Resident Evil 2 Remake, I had played 4, 5, and 6. I didn't play 4, 5, and 6. I watched those on YouTube as like a small kid, and I watched Markiplier play Resident Evil 7. So Resident Evil 2 has a very special place in my heart because of that, and it really dove me into the rest of the series. And I ended up playing Resident Evil 2 Original just this last summer. And I'll talk about the original game first. Resident Evil 2, when I first played it, I put it at B tier. And I put it at B tier because the game, much like Resident Evil 1 Original, it was easy. However, Resident Evil 2 took what was easy about the first game and amplified it. On the hardest difficulty of Resident Evil 2 Original, the game gives you so much ammo to the point where if you get the shotgun in this game, you do not need to use a single other weapon in the game, and you can just only use the shotgun in this game. It is so incredibly easy, and I think that does take away from the experience of the game. That easiness kind of sent me with a bad tone, as well as the pacing. I think the pacing of the game is kind of imperfect. Where I played Claire A, Leon B. I want to do the canon one first, and then I did Leon A, Claire B. And because I've had played the remake before this, I was used to doing every boss in the same run, which I was kind of mixed on because it made no sense. When I played Claire A and I got to the G Adult as a boss, and then I had, I think then you fight G2 on the trolley, and then you think you do the alligator, And then you have your final boss, which I think is G4. It was really weirdly paced, in my opinion. And like the RPD is such a fantastic area. The puzzles in this game are kind of not really all there. They're really simple. They're pretty easy. And I wish they were better. The liquors in this game I feel like are very clunky. And the clunkiness doesn't really work for them. You can like walk slower in this game, yet they still come after you. You pretty much just have to stand still and wait for them. They also die in like 3 shotgun shots, so it doesn't really matter. They don't really have a threat to you. They don't pose a threat. And I mean, I'm just tearing apart this game right now. And then overall, you go through RPD, and RPD is fantastic, but that is like 2/3 of the game. The sewers is quite literally 5 minutes long. It's like 2 rooms. And then the lab in this game is actually quite fire. I'm not gonna lie. With the fact that you go from the sewers, which is like micro area, then you get to the train elevator, which is dope. You take the trolley to the train elevator. You do a boss on the train elevator, I think, depending on what playthrough you're doing. And then you get to this lab that is like more factorial, just like RE3 or RE1. And it takes what RE1 did with the factory lab setting and amplifies it further to be like this massive, sprawling laboratory that you feel like has been here forever. You feel like Umbrella has been cemented in Raccoon City, and I think that's awesome. The way they handle Plant 43 in this game too is phenomenal. I love how they explore Plant 43. And overall, the lab design in this game is phenomenal. And the whole ending stretch of this game is great. Intertwined, but contradictory, the game is super easy, and that is never a thing that I don't think about with this game. So when I originally played it, I felt it was just a B tier, and I played it in like the best way possible. I literally beat this game. It was like tornado sirens were going off, right? Thunderstorms everywhere, in the best atmosphere I possibly could for this game. Yeah, it just didn't vibe with me that well. And then another thing with specifically Claire A, the fact that in the beginning of the game you get to RPD, which I love the beginning segment where you have like Kendo and he's like, "Oh hey little lady," and he just gets devoured, and then Leon goes in there and he's like, "Get the hell out of here," you know, and then he still dies. I think that is really funny to me, and I love the extended trek to the police station, making it feel like somehow this police station that is infested with zombies is safer than the outside streets of Raccoon City. And I think that's a cool concept. But when you get into the police station, as I think it's both Leon and Claire, you go to the left side, you go to the left wing, and you go up the stairs, and then you come back down, and I think you like scan the card or something, and you have to go back up the same staircase. It's just a weird pacing, backtracking thing towards the beginning of the game that felt off to me. I played the game and I just did not care for it. Other things that I did not care for in this game include the Ada and Sherry sections are kind of uninspired, where you play as Sherry and Ada, and you kind of just go through the same exact area as both characters in the A and B campaigns. What I love is how when the items you collect as Sherry or Ada, you give to Claire or Leon. I think that is a really cool change. And I also think the basement of the RPD is also really sick. Again, the RPD is just fantastic. I like the interaction Sherry and Ada hold. I think that's very interesting and unique. But overall, it just kind of blew. It blew dick. And then I further played the game, and it was still easy. I ended up getting S ranks. This was the first time I got S ranks in a fixed camera angle Resident Evil game, which I was impressed with myself. But again, it goes to the game being so easy. And then I thought about it, and the game got better in my head. And I set the game, I played it more, and it went to an A tier, because I'm like, okay, as much as this game is just really easy, and there's a lot I do not like, the game, the way when I beat Leon B, the way it meshed together, the way the B playthrough felt, it was so different from other experiences in the series. The zapping system is one of the main things in this game, where certain items that you pick up as an A character will not be there for a B character, and it kind of tries to do what Resident Evil 1 Remake did years later, in that you have to think about your next move before you actually do it. You don't know how hard the second campaign is going to be for when you play Claire A. so you don't really know what to take, and you're taking a risk by taking anything or not taking anything. And I think the zapping system is awesome. And then I also really love how, as an A character, you can choose to close off the west or east wing windows, which makes one of those hallways completely safe for one of the characters. The zapping system is something that when you put it into a game like this, it works out perfectly. I mentioned the pacing was a little off when I first played the game, but when I played Leon B, I felt like I got a full story from a different perspective. I was really confused when, like, Claire blew up the helicopter, right, and meets Chief Irons, which Chief Irons in this game is awesome. He's just so cold, and his demeanor is just so chilling to you. He's the chief of police, yet he's so insane, so calm, and he has the mayor's daughter just laying there. The way he acts in this game is phenomenal. Chief Irons is phenomenal in this game. And you blow up the helicopter though, but you get to that area after you blow up the helicopter, and when I played Leon B, I was going through, I'm like, this doesn't feel the most different, which I do really like how you enter through the back of the police station and you actually see how that helicopter crash actually occurred. I also love the cutscene where you see Mr. X being shot down from the sky. Also a really cool sequence. And then when you're playing as Leon B, and the helicopter explodes, but that's a new area for both Leon to go through. That is just excellent. The way that Claire's story affects Leon's story is awesome, and vice versa. When you go play as Leon B and you go through the sewers, there's no alligator. That is freaking phenomenal. And I could be getting some of the scenarios mixed up. The fact that Claire goes down the train elevator, and then Leon, the train elevator is already done, so you have to call it back up and then go back down, and then it gets stuck. And you have to go through the lab through like a backwards way. That is phenomenal. And I've heard a lot of people say on the B scenario, they didn't care for Mr. X. Mr. X was kind of just like an okay character, but I knew he dropped items when I played this game, so I just sat there and killed him every time. And he felt like a presence. He felt like the piece that was missing in the original Resident Evil 1. The way he just comes at so different times, and I know you can just exit the room, he feels like a presence that you need to watch out for. Leading up to the final boss of the B scenario, well, final, we're not going to get to G5 yet, and the super tyrant in this game, the music, the way it's presented, and the fact that the fight is so quick. And the fight's quick because the game knows you cannot kill it or even really damage it because of how quick and powerful this thing is. I love how the Super Tyrant is just insane. You have no chance. And the game gives you the rocket launcher really quick. And the main idea of the boss fight is you gotta get the rocket launcher shot off before you get killed. And that is so phenomenal in its game design. The Super Tyrant is awesome. I love how you do the other half of the boss fights. I think you do, in the second playthrough, you do G1, do G3, Super Tyrant, and then you do G5. And G5 is also a phenomenal boss. Phenomenal in that he's a good setting stone. And I like the final cutscene, which this glitched out for me, and it was like half the frame rate, and it was choppy, where all the characters kind of come together and they all do something in this final cutscene, even if it is ridiculous, even if Sherry is climbing God knows where, who knows what Leon's doing, who knows what Claire is doing. Every character comes together to defeat G5, and I think that's awesome. And the original ending is just a very sweet ending to this game. When I played the game again, it got even better. And then I played Leon A and then Claire B. And I saw how the story changed when I played the game through the other perspectives of the characters. And I was like, holy hell, this game might be peak. The way the story is in this game, and here's how I'll put it. The story of this game is one of the best in the entire series, and because the story is so good, it sets it at S tier. The way the story is intertwined with each other and how it changes depending on the playthrough that you do is such a hard thing to do. Yet they did it so extremely well. And because of that, I have to put it at S tier, and I love this game because of that. The gameplay part of this game, honestly, it's mid. I do not care for it that much. But the way this game is built is so extremely good, and I love it for that. And I really cannot give it enough credit to how monumental this game is for the series. And another thing that made me put it at S tier is that the way it evolves the series. While Resident Evil 1 kind of felt like dead in both, you're all alone in this game and there isn't too much to the enemy design and all that. Resident Evil 2 takes the story and the gameplay and amplifies it further, where it adds in new weapons, it adds in new characters, and it makes it on a city-wide scale. When you play Resident Evil 2, you really feel like everything is over, everything's ending. Anywhere outside the RPD is freaking scary as hell. You see people die. Marvin dies, he turns into a zombie. You see the people in the initial helicopter crash just get murdered. You see Kendo get ate alive. The stakes of this game are so much higher, and it ends with an explosion in the lab. I don't remember if the nuke is shown at the end of this game. I don't think it is. And because it evolves the series to basically what it is today, not only does Resident Evil 1 introduce Chris and Jill, which are two very important characters, right? Chris more so than Jill in the modern day. Resident Evil 2 introduces Leon and Claire, and Sherry, and Ada Wong. It's insane how well it fleshes out these characters and puts them into perspective how important they would be later on. Resident Evil 2 Original evolved the series to basically what it is today. It introduced more than just the regular tyrant. It introduced the tyrant. It introduced the threat that you would be facing throughout the entire series. The tyrant is so monumental for the entire series, and specifically Mr. X, and how Mr. X is evolved throughout the entire series. Everything comes back to Mr. X. When they design a tyrant, it comes back to Resident Evil 2, Mr. X. It's crazy how much this game affected the rest of the series. Resident Evil 1 set the setting stone. Resident Evil 2 evolved it. It didn't just do Resident Evil 1 again. It changed it in its own way, and it is perfect for that, and it is monumental for that. Resident Evil 2 Original is just so important to the series, and it is so impressive at what it does right. It does a lot wrong, and it would be, if it had a great difficulty curve and pacing, it would be probably top 3, maybe even be top 1, but it doesn't. But it does so much right that is so impactful. And I really appreciate this game. That being said, they take this game that is so important and they remake it. Obviously, Resident Evil 2 Remake had a huge campaign behind it. People wanted it. They were supposed to remake 2 and 3 just in the style of Resident Evil 1 Remake, yet they didn't because they put it onto the GameCube and it didn't sell that well. And people really wanted Resident Evil 2 Remake. It was important to get it to modern audiences with the release of Resident Evil 7. And the whole idea of we do it is so different in the gaming space today. You don't really see that communication between company and consumer, customer, however you want to describe people who play gamers. You don't really see that. You know, this game is super hard to remake. It's gonna be a challenge, but you know what? We do it. Resident Evil 2 Remake, I think, successfully stands right next to Resident Evil 2 Original for completely different reasons. And I will say these games are in order of how I imagine them on each tier. So Resident Evil 1 is more than Resident Evil 0. Resident Evil 2 is more than Resident Evil 2 Remake. And I will say Resident Evil 2 Remake, the way it reimagines the RPD, it's in the sewers, is insane. It takes the fantastic giant RPD from the original game and evolves it into something new that can be played in a third-person setting. It changes the layout in a perfect way to make it flow. The pacing of Resident Evil 2 Remake is near perfection. And then the sewers, people don't like the sewers. I like the sewers. They feel complex, but they're not. It's not like 2 rooms like the original. It is a sprawling sewer system with different enemies, and it feels like you are trekking through anything just to escape and find out and defeat Umbrella. The pacing of this game is fantastic. The voice actors are pretty fantastic. The models of the characters are pretty fantastic. I don't like Claire's model in this game. It might be her model or her voice actor. It's one of the two, and I can never decipher it. And I think this isn't just Claire. I just notice it in Claire more. Where in this game, I feel like, because Capcom kind of takes characters and exaggerates their proportions a bit more to make them look like handsomer, I guess, or more like gamey. And I feel like they did that with Claire, and it sticks out a bit more to me. I feel like specifically when she talks, the way her mouth moves feels really awkward and often it really doesn't feel like Claire Redfield to me from, I'm talking about the original Code Veronica and Revelations 2. It kind of gives me a different vibe and it kind of sets me off, and I think that's why I like Leon's campaign a bit more in this, is just because I don't like how Claire's model portrays the character, I guess. Her outfit is fantastic, but I'm talking about mainly just face, just her mouth section, and I don't know if that is just her voice actor or the mouth, but that kind of sets me off. But beyond that, the models are great, the characters are great. Each character is evolved to be almost greater than they were in the original. Marvin has a much bigger role. Other officers in the police station have a much greater role. Well, greater role. We see them die, I guess. And the emotion set in the characters' voices is just much greater. And that's something I'll mention about Resident Evil 1 Remake. The characters' voices are so much better than the original. You were just a Jill sandwich. It's classic, but it's cheesy. I love it though. And then Resident Evil 2's gameplay. It takes the easy gameplay of Resident Evil 1 and adds in some mechanics found in later games such as crafting, and it basically creates the perfect difficulty curve in any Resident Evil game. The adaptive difficulty in this game works in the player's favor at all times to make the perfect gameplay experience. When I first played this game, I was playing it on normal mode, and I had 50 bullets at the time of me getting to the final boss in Leon's campaign, and I was like, wow, I'm cooked. But because of the adaptive difficulty, eventually just brute forcing it, I was able to beat the boss. Because of the adaptive difficulty, it has the perfect difficulty curve ever. And it's added on in hardcore mode, which takes everything you've done in standard mode and reads how you've played the game and creates a hardcore difficulty perfect for your experience. And hardcore mode in this game is tough as hell, but I love it. It is an excellent challenge, and the challenges in this game will keep you on this game forever, right? The S+ challenge is so incredibly hard, but it's fun. It's so much fun because they set this game up gameplay-wise to where the gameplay itself feels like a puzzle. Each and every single movement, hallway, zombie that you face, enemy, feels like you are facing your own set of puzzles to get around this mansion. The way the gameplay in the game feel works, it just clicks. When you are trying to run through a room and not get grabbed, that is a puzzle in itself. When you are shooting a zombie, that's a puzzle. How you kill zombies is a puzzle. The fact that you can shoot its leg and then it will fall, and you'll see the tendons in its leg just pull apart, but the zombie is immobilized in a certain way, that is a puzzle. And adding on, the game adds more puzzles and amplifies the puzzles from the original game. There's so many little, like the little portable safes, that is a great simple puzzle that adds on to the RE2 experience. They add in so many safes. They just add so much to the RPD and gameplay. The gameplay, Resident Evil 2 Remake has the perfect and best gameplay experience in the entire series, and I will stand by that. Resident Evil 2 Original has one of the best story experiences in the entire series, while Resident Evil 2 takes everything Resident Evil 2 Original did wrong and perfects it. The pacing is great, the gameplay is great, and the atmosphere is even better. Resident Evil 2 Original fails in that it has the bright colors of the PS1. Resident Evil 2 takes that and amplifies it to where it's just RPD feels terrifying to get through. Ada Wong is so much better. Leon is better. I'd say Claire's overall characterization is better. Marvin is better, and we've been through this. Sherry is overall better. However, this game does so much right, and at the same time, it does so much that pisses me off. I cannot stand playing this game. And when I say that, I don't mean it like I'm of course gonna play the game. It just pisses me the hell off. And let's start with the modern Resident Evil games. Any character that comes back, the voice actors. I love all the voice actors in the remake, but some of the characters in the original voice actors could have came back, such as Claire. She's the only one who is, well, the original Claire voice actor is the only voice actor who's only portrayed one character throughout the entire series until RE2 Remake. The reason they switched it is because all the old voice actors are part of unions, and Capcom simply does not want to deal with the unionization. That's why we don't have the original Jill model of voice actor for Resident Evil 3 Remake, and also just moving on to other remake properties. And that sucks, and it pisses me off. That pisses me off a lot. And then moving on to what else pisses me off, they removed the zapping system. Resident Evil 2 Remake, I felt had potential to, they could have added in the Crimson Heads, right? Adding on to what RE1 Remake sets up, and also amplifying the T-Rides, where, say in Resident Evil 2 Remake, you go through the RPG, and you go through this area, and you go through the RPG as Leon or Claire A, however you want to do it, and then you come back as Claire B, whatever enemies that you did not successfully take down, come back as Crimson Heads in that B scenario. That would have been excellent. They removed the zapping system, they removed the window shutter area and replaced it with wooden boards. I love the wooden boards, but I would have loved to see the window shutter system come back, because both hallways, the East Wing and the West Wing, are absolute hell, and no matter what, you cannot successfully board up either of those sides. And it feels like a disappointment that they removed that. All the freaking optional items that you can pick up for each character also removed. There's no interconnectivity between the stories. Every story feels so individual. It sets me off, and it pisses me off, because Resident Evil 2 did it so well. And I get it. This game was slightly rushed, and that if you look in the code of the game, if you look in the cut content, they had so many ideas and so much. They wanted to add in the original zapping system and alternate cutscenes. They recorded like 6 alternate cutscenes, yet they just didn't have the time to put it out. When Capcom was making Resident Evil 2, 3, and even Village, and even 7, they slightly rushed these games. They wanted to get them out before they slowed down development for Resident Evil 4 and 9, but we'll get to that more later. And that pisses me off. I hate rush games, and I hate unfinished games. Red Dead Redemption 2 is fantastic, but when you get to the final 2 chapters of that game, you can tell that game is severely unfinished, and it pisses me off. Why not just fix the freaking game, you know? Make it to the best of its extent. And this isn't just, I don't blame the developers, I blame the studio. Capcom, I love you, Capcom, but don't piss me off. That pisses me off. And because there is no interconnectivity between the two campaigns, the story sucks. The story is just bad. When you play Leon A and you get the whole Marvin cutscene, right? You get all the Marvin content, you go through the story, you fight every single boss, which every single boss is awesome in this game. And when I played it at first, I hated G2. I replayed it, and when I learned, if you actually attack G2, he's really fun. Again, it feels like a puzzle. It's really fun. All the bosses in this game are freaking phenomenal, but you fight every boss in every campaign no matter what. In Claire A and Leon B, you fight the same exact bosses besides the final boss, and that sucks. And I also hate how they made Mr. X and G4 character specific rather than scenario specific. So it feels like there was no real care put into what side of the car they were put on, because Leon sat on the left side of the car in the original game. It infected his entire campaign and how the story progressed. In the remake, it has no leeway because it's character based and not scenario based, and that sucks and that's stupid. When you play this game, you play Leon B, there is no purpose to playing Claire B besides getting the true ending. And you can tell me I'm wrong. I would love to see like arguments for this in the comments. In my opinion, if you are better off playing Claire A after Leon A. That way you get the Marvin storyline. That way you get literally for a complete full circle story. Look up the freaking ending online. I don't care. G5, I love G5, and he is less interesting in this game to me because he just feels so quick, and I feel like there's less character interaction in that boss fight. Claire and Leon interact twice in this game, while in the original game they interact so much, and they feel like actual characters with how they interact. and see each other throughout the game. There's so many times where Leon interacts with Sherry in the original game that you do not get here. The story of Resident Evil 2 Remake is balls. It is balls, it is simplistic, and it is a disappointment. Moving on to the story, Chief Irons in this game sucks. He sucks. He was so spooky in the original game, but now he's so in your face about it. I get it. The writer wanted to make him as hateable as possible. Apparently, he was so hateable, they told him to tone it down. It's like, dude, maybe take a cue from the original game and just make him look fine. He sucks in this game. His death is worse in this game, too. In the original game, he could split in two down the middle. In this game, it's just a little, oh, okay, that's stupid. And I hate him in this game. Along with the orphanage section. The orphanage section sucks. It would be a shame if they brought that back. It's just like, it's a waste of time. It really is. You don't get anything out of it. You don't really gain anything out of it. The only thing that it sets up is Chief Irons dying, and that's really it. It's unnecessary, and I don't get it, and it should have been fleshed out a bit more to make it better. Stealth sections in game that are mandatory like that suck, because you can only go through it at such a specific pace. In a game that needs to be replayed, when there are times where you just sit there on your phone because you have to wait for something to happen, that's stupid, and that is poor design. Wow. Ada, though, on the other hand, her section is better. I don't really understand her EMF gun. It's like here and there. But her section overall, I think, is pretty good. I like it a lot better than the original, but they removed the interconnectivity between Ada and Sherry that was found in the original. In this game, Leon and Ada never ever interact with Sherry until the end of the game, and it makes the final cutscene feel off and bad. And then moving on to just the characters, I think Annette is kind of worse in this game. The way she acts around Sherry feels so pathetic and meaningless. She just feels like a dick. In the original game, I felt like I understood her motives a lot more with taking care of Sherry and wanting to protect her. But in this game, she just feels like a dick. Yeah, let me leave my daughter in the trash hoop. And I know she's infected, but, you know, I'm just can't do anything, even though there's literally a here in the lab like 10 seconds from here. And because of that, I'm going to make Claire go through the whole sewers. Yeah, I don't get Anna in this game. I don't think she's as well written as she was in the original game. And I wish we got more Ada and Annette cutscenes, kind of like we did in the original game. And then William, I feel like he's kind of the same. I had thoughts about him when I played 2 Remake. I played 2 Remake again in January. But I forgot. But overall, I like William's character. I think he's excellent in both games, and I like his progression throughout the boss fights. It's also a shame that they removed enemies from the original game. I hate it when they remove content. If you're gonna remake a game, take the original game and make it better in every single way. Do not remove a single thing. They removed a single thing. They removed a lot, of course, but the giant spiders being removed takes a lot out of the experience. I just don't understand the concept of, besides just like wanting to cut content just to get the game out, or making the game more grounded and realistic, which is what they could have wanted to do. The giant spiders are such an impactful part of the original Resident Evil games. It's a shame not seeing them in the RE engine. They had such an important place in enemy design and giving you more enemies to fight, where in RE2 you really just have zombies and the lookers. And they try to add on more with the G-Adults being not a boss, but I think the G-Adult being a boss in the original game serves to be much better, as it helps with the pacing of the overall game because of how the zapping system worked. In this game, the fact they're just kind of everywhere, I'm like, okay, well, maybe there's something to replace them as a boss. No, there's nothing, right? When you go through the sewers as the same character, it's like, as Leon, when you go through the sewers, if it was G-Adults, that would be dope, right? But if you went through the sewers as Claire and it was giant spiders, that would add so much more variety to each playthrough, and I would love that. Or make it scenario based, like I mentioned before, to where in B scenario it's spiders, in A scenario it's G-Adults. Just something to add a little bit more spice to it. I mean, they also remove like the crows and stuff, which, come on, the crows are such a vital enemy in the series. That's a joke, but like, still, I don't like it when they remove stuff. They changed the IVs too to make them zombie-like, and I don't like that. The IVs in Remake piss me off because they're so annoying. I feel like, in my opinion, on console, they're hard to handle. And I mean, it can be argued that they're hard to handle in the original game. However, I just like their designs better in the original game. And if you kept your distance, you'd be able to kill them. In this game, they just feel so in your face, and I dislike the idea that they're just kind of like another zombie. Also remove the mutated liquors. And the mutated liquors just show progression within the virus and show progression within the game and how things are getting tougher and scarier. You don't get that sense of progression through enemies in Resident Evil 2. When you get to the lab, yeah, they have, oh, here's a zombie that's green. And the liquors are exactly the same. But I will say overall the liquors are much better in RE2 Remake. They are fantastic. You do not want to kill them and you only want to stealth them. Just thought I'd put that in there. And then they also remove the giant moth, which is like, you can do with or without, but still, I would have loved to see the giant moth mentioned, at least mentioned somewhere or shown. The design of the lab is also balls. The idea of that it's just a white sterile lab makes it so much less unique and different from other things that aren't Resident Evil. The white sterile lab just doesn't work in Resident Evil, in my opinion. It sets up Umbrella Corporation to be like this really rich corporation, which I guess they are making bioweapons for like the government or whatever. But it sets them up to just be like, oh, they were always here. Well, in the original game, it felt like they were like super undercover, super no one would know what's going on. How did they build this giant lab to the quality that they did with the technology that they did without anyone knowing? It's less believable just because of the quality of the technology. And also the white sterile lab just doesn't feel scary. It doesn't feel scary. It doesn't feel interesting. And because they removed the whole section where you go through the back end of the lab too, also sucks. And all the removed parts suck. The alligator boss in this game, honestly, people love the alligator boss in the original. I think they're kind of the same quality. There's nothing to it. But in the concept art, they showed a evolved alligator boss fight that was so much more interesting. And it's a shame that they had to remove it. Again, Capcom, why? And then, of course, moving on to more positives, I guess. Kendo is much better in this game. It's just a shame that Claire never interacts with him. Again, because it's character specific and not scenario specific. Kendo really should have met Claire, but his whole cutscene with Leon is phenomenal, and I love how they handle him in future games, in the remake series specifically. And then, I mean, overall, it's a shame that the music in RE2 Remake is less prevalent. Whenever RE2 Remake's music can be heard, it's like some of the best in the series. Yeah, it's just never playing. The save room theme is excellent, but it just never plays. But when you hear like Mr. X or G4's theme, it's like, holy smokes, this is crazy. It's also a shame that they kind of just removed all mentions of Spencer Mansion and Wesker. When you go to Wesker's desk in this game, it's kind of impossible to know that that is Wesker's desk, and that is kind of stupid. I don't know what they were thinking. Like, Capcom kind of like hates Wesker half the time, but they love him half the time. And again, I really just don't understand what they were thinking. I were just removing all mentions of Spencer Mansion and Wesker. At least I don't recall it being mentioned. I know they want to keep RE1 Remake kind of like, oh, it's their golden child, you know, they don't want to touch it, but did they plan to remake the games without Wesker? Like, obviously when they made RE2 Remake, they planned to make RE3 Remake. 4 Remake was probably greenlit at this time. They were probably thinking about RE9 at this time. RE8 was probably in the thick of development. Like, they had plans. Why did they just remove all the mentions of it? I don't understand that. Like, obviously when they were remade 2, there was a greater idea behind it. So it just feels really off. And that's kind of what I mean between RE2 original and remake. The reason these games both stand in S tier is because if these games were combined, they would be the best Resident Evil game of all time, no matter what. But this game's story is just phenomenal. It is phenomenal, and the way it's set up is phenomenal. This game's gameplay and pacing is phenomenal. The two games work in tandem to give you the perfect Resident Evil experience, and that's the thing, is the remake has the advantage because it's a remake with modern technology. The fact that I have people like who play 2 remake, and then they'll play like something like 6, and they'll be like, how does Sherry really know Leon? And it's like, well, play the original. I should not. If you have a remake of the game, the original game should be an option to play, but you should not have to recommend someone to play it just to get the full story. Because the story of Resident Evil 2 is just bad. And like I said, the ending of Resident Evil 2 Remake, and it's cheesy in the original game, and the remake, it feels incomplete and weird. And if in like the whole area they're in just feels weird. They literally look at the camera and they're like, we're gonna fight them together, knowing that Leon and Claire never ever meet up in a single game again. Also weird. And then Sherry's like, can you adopt me? Well, Leon's never even met this girl. Like, that's weird. And yeah, I don't know. Both these games do everything they do right is just so good. But everything they do wrong just pisses me off. And 2 Remake pisses me off a lot more than 2 Original. And that's why 2 Remake is below 2 Original. But overall, I think that closes out the Resident Evil 2 chapter of this ranking. God, that was a lot. God, we're moving into so much more. Oh, okay. So, let me talk about Resident Evil 3. I have a lot of thoughts on Resident Evil 3. Both of these games, right? Resident Evil 3 Remake, I remember playing Remake when it came out. It was right on the cusp of the great 2020 lockdown, I guess. And I was so excited. I saw trailers for this game, and I was after I played 2 Remake, and I was like, this could be one of the best games ever made. I was so excited for 3 Remake. I knew about Nemesis, and I was like, oh, okay, he's pretty dope. And I followed this game's like trailers like crazy. When I saw Marvin in there, I was like, okay, this has potential. And I played it, and I'm not gonna get into my opinions on it. And I was like, okay, I want to play the original game, right? Because of course I wanted to play the original of all the games. I played Resident Evil 3. It was my sophomore year of college, so I think it was like 2 years ago. And I just have to say, this game is phenomenal. I put it above Resident Evil 1 Remake. It is so extremely good. The way this game is built and the way it came out so quickly is insane to me. This game made me fall in love with Jill Valentine. I love her in Resident Evil 1. The way it evolves her character in 3 just makes her so interesting to me. And the way Resident Evil 2 sets up the city, everywhere in the city, being so dangerous, yet Resident Evil 3 puts you out into the city. This game's design is phenomenal. From the start, you're set out into this area with a bunch of zombies, yet you feel like nothing feels unfair in this game. You see Dario, I think his name is Dario Ross. That whole interactions peak, you get to the save room theme of this game is phenomenal. And of course, it builds up to RPD. You go through the city streets, which are stressful as hell and dangerous as hell, before you get to RPD to get your guns and stuff, right? And then you meet Nemesis, and he just instantly kills Brad Vickers from Resident Evil 1, setting up the scope for this game, how this game is not messing around. Resident Evil 3 has stakes, and they're gonna stick by them. And the way that you can choose to do things in this game that impact the story is awesome. When I played 3 Original, I chose to kill Nemesis every single time I could. I really wanted the gun upgrades, and I loved the motivation for the gun upgrades. Mr. X in Resident Evil 2 is good. I wish they had given the gun upgrades to Mr. X in Resident Evil 2 Remake or an Original. In Resident Evil 3, Nemesis is phenomenal. He does not feel scripted at all, despite being super scripted, and I think that is fantastic. His boss fights are so difficult, it's crazy, and this game also introduces the quick turn. The quick turn is one of the most important things in this entire series for me, for game feel. This is one of the best feeling original games in the series. The dodge is janky, and yeah, I agree, the dodge is... just don't use the dodge. It sucks, basically. But yeah, and the way this game is built is pretty much perfect. Where you go to the RPD, you get all the scares of the RPD. I mean, it's cool seeing the RPD again, of course, but Nemesis jumping through the window and the RPD is just great. And the way Nemesis just feels like a constantly pursuing threat, where I would choose to fight him, and then I'd play like 10-20 minutes, he'd come right back. And I'd be like, oh my god, get this guy off my freaking back. Or I'd be exploring the city streets, he'd come back. And you go to the RPD, you get all the gas stuff and all the stuff, and you really feel like you are exploring the city. And what I really like is how the further you get in the game with the specific items, the city feels more dead. Where you go back to where like Dario Ross was, he's dead and there's zombies infested. What made me really fall in love with this game, you go back to the Dario Ross area with the first save room, and you see this blonde girl running for her life. You see her and you're like, well, I gotta save this chick. And you follow her, you hear her scream, and you see her and she's being eaten alive. In that moment in this game for me, the area is now not roaming with zombies. The area is quiet. the city feels dead. There's no one here. The dead is dead. There's just nothing. It's only you and this blonde woman. And the fact that there's one person here and you still couldn't save her, I think shows how the story develops for Jill Valentine and both Leon S. Kennedy in the modern games, of course. And that blonde girl just set the tone for the game, for the rest of the game for me, of just like, wow. Something about how they portrayed it was just like kind of disturbing to me, but it really just feels like the whole city is against you. Everything is against you. They put Jill Valentine's in her freaking pajamas in this game, right? This game pushes you to be vulnerable in every single way. Jill Valentine's in her pajamas in this game. She literally just, it's like she woke up in her apartment and zombies just flooded in and it explodes. She's left with a pistol with like 10 bullets, right? Nemesis is constantly fighting you. There's no one in the city alive. They're all zombies, and when the zombies aren't there, it's just dead silence. And then the only person that you meet in this game as a friend is an umbrella officer. And I think that also goes to show how vulnerable Jill is in this game and how vulnerable that makes the player feel. Just like RE1 Remake, every time I stepped into the city streets in this game, I felt like anything could happen. And because of Nemesis too, I felt like genuinely, I didn't know when he was going to appear again. I didn't know how he worked. And usually breaking down these games code is pretty easy in my mind. Nemesis I can't really break down. Of course he has scripted events and he appears in some locations. I just don't know how they did it. And not only that, the fact that your actions, they give you story choices in this game that affect the entire game and areas that you go through, adds another layer of vulnerability to the player. This game is set up to just perfection. And the fact that also enemy spawns are randomized and item locations are randomized add another sense of you have no idea what's going on. It makes every playthrough just a little different. This is the game that I think has the most replay value in the entire series because of the randomness, because of the choices the game gives you, which they don't do any of this ever again. Weird. It's such an easy and simple thing to do to make games replayable, yet they don't. Resident Evil 3, and I haven't even talked about the second half of the game. Resident Evil 3 is just so incredible. I mean, they add in giant bugs too. They have the giant spiders, of course, but they have hunters. And you get to the train section, and the train scene is just awesome. And then you get to the clock tower. The clock tower is a short little area, but the atmosphere brings you back into Resident Evil 1. It's so different, it's so unique, and you feel like you're actually exploring different avenues of the city. And of course you get to the cutscene where this literally feels like it could be the end of the game. Yet, Nemesis shoots down the helicopter and the game continues on. You go to the hospital, you play as Carlos, Jill gets infected. Not only is Jill kind of putting in trust into Carlos, the player puts trust in Carlos because the player directly plays as Carlos. And Carlos's journey through the hospital is pretty phenomenal to me. I love the hospital section. It all culminates to Jill fighting Nemesis in the undead factory, which you have to go through Raccoon City Park to get to anyways. Again, that is just also sick. And the Nemesis fight in this game is phenomenal. Everything in this game works and builds up to that Nemesis fight, where you have these acid valves that you have to spray on him. And you feel like over the course of the fight, he's like melting. Over the course of the game, his tentacles are protruding out of him. And how is that going to lead somewhere? You know, he gets more powerful throughout the game because you are directly attacking it. Your attacks make him more powerful. So how is the acid going to affect him in this fight? Well, he comes back as this blob creature. And not to mention the undead factory in this game is maybe the best final area in the entire series. The fact that you can see all the dead soldiers, all the dead tyrants, and Nemesis comes in as a blob and devours one of the tyrants just for some sort of nutrients because he's only set on killing you. And the fact that Jill always has that target on her back and he says it's stars makes you feel so vulnerable. And even in this moment, even though he is a blob, even though he's been pretty much tortured throughout this whole game, he still comes off as scary. This creature does not stop for anything. even its own life, because it just is meant to kill you. And it all culminates in the final boss fight, where when you finally kill Nemesis, when Jill finally kills Nemesis, when she overcomes everything that is set up in this entire game, it feels so incredibly satisfying. The way Nemesis is built in this game is just perfect. The way the game is built around Jill is perfect. The way the music affects the game is perfect. The atmosphere in this game is pretty freaking perfect for a PS1 game. The way the gameplay works is perfect, and I love Gravedigger as a page breaker for Nemesis. It is greatly needed, and I like how Gravedigger is foreshadowed throughout the game. Gravedigger is freaking peak, and I haven't even got to really talk about Carlos and Nikolai, but Carlos in the original game, he's kind of like, I like him. He's not the best in Nikolai, and Nikolai is not my favorite character, but I like him as an added threat for Jill. And then of course you have 6 endings to this game. I got the one with Barry Burton because I think he's freaking awesome. Overall, I mean, Resident Evil 3 is probably the pinnacle of Resident Evil, and I haven't even gone into how it affected other games, because this is the game that introduces item crafting. This is the game that introduces gunpowder. This is the game that introduces the fact that, oh, it's like if you craft like ammo like 6 times, you get like deluxe ammo every single time you make that ammo again. And just little stuff like that makes the game feel fun, makes the game feel fleshed out, makes every action feel worth it. Every action needs to have significance and importance to it. And Resident Evil 3 capitalizes them at perfectly. This game, I did not expect to like it as much as I did. I was super curious on it, and I'm so glad that I actually beat it. In my other ranking, I had not beaten the game. And this one, of course, I have, and I can say so much about it and why it is so incredible. And going back into Resident Evil 3 Remake, I'm just gonna be straight with this one. This is one of my least favorite games ever made. God, I do not like this game. Now, I've heard a lot of people say Resident Evil 3 Remake is a good game, but not a good remake. I disagree. I'm just gonna start square one. The intro cutscene is balls. It takes like 10 minutes to get to, no, it takes like 15 minutes of just like running straight to get to actual cutscene, and that's just bad game design for a game that you want to replay. We'll get to that more as we get further into the series, because that is a continuing issue for some reason. But yeah, let's just start. Nemesis wears freaking trash bags and he looks ridiculous. I tried, when I first saw him, I was like, okay, he looks interesting when I saw the remake coming out, and then I played it and he's just wearing trash bags. His proportions feel off and he doesn't look scary in the slightest. In the whole intro scene, for one, the whole intro scene where like Jill is like touching her face in the mirror, she's traumatized from Resident Evil 1, and I like how that she's pretty much, Umbrella has trapped her in her apartment pretty much. I like that added fact. Yet in this game, Jill just wakes up and she's in a similar looking outfit to the original game, yet she's in full jeans, has all her gun gear. I don't know if she has I think she gets the gun gear later on, but she's in jeans, boots, and her shirt or her tank top. Doesn't make much sense how she just woke up like that. The whole Nemesis cutscene in the beginning makes Nemesis feel not threatening at all, because he cannot kill Jill, and it's all fully cutscene scripted. Just hold up and you can avoid Nemesis. And then there's just a lot of that where you go through the city streets. For one, Brad dies so unceremoniously in this game because they didn't remake Resident Evil 1. Most players don't really know Brad Vickers or Jill Valentine, which that's not a flaw with this game. That's just a flaw in how they decided to remake these games, but I'll get into that more a bit later. The whole beginning sequence is just bad. You get to the part where you're on the top of the parking garage and you're starting the car, and then it's just like, oh, well, Nemesis is there. The helicopter also just explodes up there. Don't know how that happened. It wasn't Nemesis. And then Jill's characterization goes from being this vulnerable girl who is traumatized but has an undying fight for Umbrella to just this potty mouth, strong female character with little character. When I say strong female character, there is a way that strong female characters were written back in like the 2020 era of games and movies, like right from Star Wars. She's not a well-written character because she just overcomes everything. In Resident Evil 3 Remake, Jill is faced with obstacles, but the way she's written, she's just a complete dick to everyone, and she's very unlikable. And also going on to the unions, I do not like Jill's model in this game. I prefer the old smoky-eyed Jill versus this Jill model, but I think that might just be because I don't like how she's characterized in this game. Like, Carlos saves her after the freaking parking garage scene. I played this game also, like, I 100% it the week it came out, and then I haven't touched it since. So it's been 6 years since I played this game. I hate it, so I remember it a lot, I guess. Because then you go into, like, the sewers, or not the sewers, the subway, and you meet, like, Nikolai. Nikolai is a much better character in this game, I think. Nikolai is also the same to me, in my opinion. I didn't really care for Nikolai in the original game, and in this game he might be slightly worse because I think his motives are slightly worse because I don't understand them at all. Carlos, I like Carlos in this game, and I think he's inherently better. However, he does just feel like Chris Redfield too. He doesn't feel like his own character, and he just feels like, again, Chris too. And I'm pretty sure he's voiced by the same guy who voiced Chris in RE8, so that does not help. But his design is better. I like his hairstyle a lot better too. And he gets thrown into the city streets where you actually get into gameplay, you know, 20 minutes into the game. And the city streets last, I don't know, 5 seconds. The city streets are also just like the only really Resident Evil like gameplay experience in this game, because the rest of it is just trying to push you through events of Resident Evil 3 as fast as possible. I just remember you going to like the bug place where Carlos just tells you to go there, I think. I don't like being told to go places in Resident Evil games. I like finding it myself, especially in the original Resident Evil 3. You find everything by yourself without other people telling you. You go to the train, it's like, oh, well, we need the train parts. Well, okay. You explore and find it. In this game, it's like, go to this area right now. Go to the other side of the map, get the hose, and then come back. They don't tell you to do that, but it's pretty freaking obvious based off the design of the game. The bugs in this game are just a lot worse. In the original game, they're huge. In this game, they're like tiny, and they're only last in one section. Just overall, the enemy design is just worse in this game. They kind of take a step back from Resident Evil 2 Remake, where the zombies just kind of explode into pieces instead of like tearing apart and being like strategic puzzles. And I get it because there's more of them. And the graphics of this game are also better than the second game too. And then the game just kind of spirals to where I'm pretty certain the next thing that happens, like really at the beginning of the game, is like you play for like an hour and then the subway train explodes. And it's like, okay, and then you're in the sewers a little bit and you see like the Hunter Alphas, I think, where they take one grenade launcher and one bullet to kill. Wow, what good gameplay design. This game is freaking incredibly easy. The original game has the perfect difficulty in the series. Resident Evil 1 and 3 have like the perfect gameplay difficulty curves for any player, I feel like. 3 is extraordinarily tough, and I love it for that. 1 is too. And overall, it's just like the game just continues. You get to the clock tower and Nemesis just instantly mutates. The Nemesis boss fights in this game suck. They remove the choices, they remove the randomized items, they remove the clock tower, they removed the park, they removed Jill's section in the RPD. Dario Ross is just a forgettable character because you go there, you see him at the beginning of the game, you never go back. The blonde girl's removed, a bunch of the locations in the city streets are removed, the gas station is put just into a cutscene. A lot of the park's just completely removed. They just removed everything that made Resident Evil 3 Resident Evil 3. I mean, the hospital in this game with Carlos, I actually enjoyed. In hindsight, playing Resident Evil 3 original, just wow, it makes this game so much worse. And before I played the original game, I still had this game at F tier. Because the game, people, like I mentioned before, people say it's like, oh, it's a good game, but bad Resident Evil game. No, it's a bad game. Because a game should never really interrupt gameplay in favor of like cutscenes or anything. And that's all this game does. There's like not a single point where it favors gameplay over just like, oh, explosions, ooh, cutscene, ooh, let's just rush through the game. It sucks. It's just holding up into the next sequence. You get to the first Nemesis boss fight with the flamethrower, and for one, like Nemesis is a joke in this game. Every time you see him, yeah, he picks you up by the head and he throws you instead of crushing your head. And he has this flamethrower and he waits 20 minutes before blasting the flamethrower. God, oh my god, I hate this game. You get to you do the first Nemesis boss fight, which is freaking piss easy. I like how they give him more weapons though. I don't like how they use the rocket launcher in this one though. And you get to the parking garage. Jill survives like a 200-foot drop. Who knows? And I like how I think you see Kendo in this game and I like that. That's a good interaction between Jill and Kendo. That is not in the original game, but they literally strip tease you by placing Jill right in front of RPD without you going into RPD. That's a freaking sick joke. Wow, horrible game design. Instead they have Carlos going to RPD and like, wow, that's really sad because he has no connection to that building. And then finding out Nemesis never goes there. Like, I remember people theorizing, who broke the wall in the bathroom? It was Carlos placing C4, guys, I'm sorry. That sucks, and I wish we could see more police officers living in the RPD too. I mean, we see like how the liquor hallway turned out. We see Marvin a little bit more and how he got bit. I like that he got bit by Brad Vickers. I just wish Brad Vickers didn't die the way he did. I wish he got like infected by the Nemesis parasite and then attacked Marvin. And I wish Jill interacted with Marvin because Jill probably knew Marvin in her time as a police officer. It's ridiculous. There's so much they could have done with Jill in the RPD and they didn't. And like I said before, moving back to the clock tower, Nemesis boss fight sucks. They add in like the grenade launcher with all like the mine rounds and stuff, and it just doesn't really work for me. I never felt like it was important. And the Nemesis boss fight is just like him as a dog, just running around until you like shoot the mine rounds. It's like, God, this sucks. And the boss fight just sucks. Yeah, that's all I can say is sucks. And the fact that they tease you with the clock tower and you never go into it sucks. The Carlos hospital section, which I do, again, I like Carlos in this game, and the hospital section is like the only section of this game that I felt like is actually improved upon. For the first half of the hospital, where you're going through the hospital as Carlos, it's very scary. You have the hunters in here too, and I like how they introduced the hunters kind of like this original Resident Evil 1. That's cool. And then you get to the section that is just literally like worse than RE6, where you give Jill the cure and it's like, oh, all the zombies are coming in. Let me just gun down zombies for like 10 minutes. What are we doing? You have RE7 and then RE2 that sets itself apart and evolves the series past what RE6 did. And then they go straight back to RE6 for this game. That's so sad. That's garbage. It's garbage. I'm sorry. Because then they remove the undead factory and they replace it with the same sterile white lab from 2 Remake. Why? And oh, the Paleheads from 2 Remake? Well, they're just actual zombies in this game. But I wish they appeared in 2 Remake as an evolution of the zombie. Because they didn't do that, it just feels cheap in this game, in my opinion. They just took the DLC content of 2 Remake and just shoved it in here as to show evolution without really progressing the character through the story and the game. I guess it feels like an artificial evolution of gameplay versus a natural progression of the character. And then like you get to the final boss, well, guess what? The next boss, it's the same exact boss fight again, but you have the acid valves. Okay, you pour acid on it. They throw their zombies in there, which is garbage. I hate having other enemies in fights because I like focusing on the boss fight. Sometimes it works, but in this case it does not. And then you get to the final boss. They take the blob-filled, thirsting for just killing Jill Nemesis in the original game and replace it with some giant monster with the giant pus sacks that you have to pop. And Jill's characterization, her final line, it sucks. You want stars, I'll give you stars line. The fact that they just throw it away in the middle of the game, trash. I like the final section with Nikolai, but I wish if you, depending on who you shot and what you did, depending on like the change the ending that you got, I think that would be dope. I also don't really know Nikolai's motive because like if he's, I think it's like what, I forgot who mentioned it. If he just sold the cure, wouldn't you get more money? I don't know his motive. I don't know if he was working for Wesker. They continue to just shaft Wesker in this game, and I mean that's pretty much Resident Evil 3 Remake. The soundtrack's pretty decent. I mean overall the gameplay is just, it takes everything RE2 did and then steps it back and then tries to combine it with like RE6. That's just not good. It's not what the game needed to be. And the reason this game pisses me off so much, which again, I went through all the reasons why I hate this game, and all those reasons I mentioned were pretty much because I just didn't like it when I played it. On my first playthrough, it took me like, I think it was like 5 hours, and I'm like, that's not a good game. It's not. It's $60 for 5 hours with no extra content and skins that you have to pay for. Not the best look, and the skins look cheap as hell in my opinion. It just, I don't like the fact that this is the first time we see Jill Valentine in any Resident Evil game since Revelations 1, which came out in like 2011 or 2013. It might have been 2014. no matter what, it had been like 6 years, and in canon she hadn't appeared since 2009. And this is the reintroduction to Jill Valentine to the modern audience in the Remake series. This game, in my opinion, almost like gauges how prevalent she's going to be in the future of the series. When Resident Evil 2 Remake came out, everyone's like, well, wow, I love Leon. You know, he was already the most popular character, but Claire also got love in that game too. So I'm pretty certain Claire's gonna appear again pretty soon, right? Jill didn't vibe with people. I don't think she vibed with people from what I've seen. And from what I've seen, a lot of people just don't like her in this game. And the fact that you reintroduced Jill Valentine, one of the most beloved and important characters in the entire series, and completely dismantle her to the new audience, that sucks. This was my first real interaction with Jill Valentine, and I hated her and I did not like her until I played 3 original. And I think that is just pathetic. It sucks. And that's the thing, is like 3 original is probably my favorite game in this entire series. 3 Remake is just my least favorite. I hate it. It doesn't do anything right besides maybe the hospital. And that's doesn't say anything. It strips the series of survival horror. It backpedals into just nothingness. I wish I could say they just like instantly recovered, but they didn't. And we'll get to that later. But that is Resident Evil 2, and that is the Raccoon City trilogy complete. God, my throat's dry. Wow. Okay, so moving on to again, the Resident Evil series is just so good because I feel like every game is so monumental to this series in some fashion. It's really fun to talk about. I mean, we're moving on to one of the best games of all time, Resident Evil 4. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. I played this game soon after I played Resident Evil 3 Remake. So, like 2020, 2021. I think I played it right before 8 came out. And I'll just, not sugarcoating it. I'm pretty sure this is how I'd rank my top 3 in the entire series. I know it's a little bit early to get into to the top 3. It's Resident Evil 4, and I feel like Resident Evil series kind of has a clear top 3, in my opinion. I mean, these games, I don't really see many flaws in these games. Resident Evil 4 really took the series and what it was and evolved it. And evolution is so important to this series. Like, Resident Evil 2 evolved the series beyond Resident Evil 1. Resident Evil 3 evolved the series beyond Resident Evil 2. Resident Evil 4 didn't just evolve the series, it evolved the entire survival horror genre as a whole. And then beyond survival horror, it evolved the gaming as a whole. It pretty much invented the over-the-shoulder camera. That is insane. And the fact that this game went through so many trials and tribulations, and the fact that like 3 different games came out of the development of this. There was Haunting Ground, Devil May Cry came from Resident Evil 4, and then they also had a bunch of Resident Evil 4 prototypes with like the Hookman that were like freaking awesome, and I really hope they revisit that someday. That is a fever dream. If the Hookman ever came back and the original Resident Evil 4 ever got made, if they made a Resident Evil 4 like 4.2 where Leon does go through that, count me in, because I want it. I would love to see the original idea, but what we got is fantastic. This game is lengthy. It takes like Resident Evil 1, 2, and 3, very short games. I'm not including the remakes right now, just the progression of the original games. They are very short games, and the Resident Evil 4 is like 18 hours. And it's in 18 hours that just feels phenomenal. They bring in the crafting, they evolve the gameplay to an over-the-shoulder perspective, and they make it kind of more action-oriented to where we can really flesh out the characters a bit more. We can flesh out Leon, we can flesh out characters like Luis. I don't know why I put Luis in quotes, I'm going to put flesh out Luis and Ashley. We can flesh out Ada Wong a little bit more, right? We can flesh out the villains, we can have more happen in the story. They took advantage of the GameCube hardware, and they went full throttle with it. This game looks fantastic for 2005. And the gameplay, just, I guess we're starting off with the gameplay. It's much like Resident Evil 2 Remake, where it feels like a puzzle. A puzzle that everything has an option, everything is important. To what this game does the most impressively is the inventory system is fun. The fact that organizing your inventory in this game is just as fun as it is crazy to think about. And everything is clicky, everything's responsive, and the story is perfectly cheesy. The first village segment is the perfect way to get players used to the new controls of the series. It can be hard, but once you get it, that is probably going to be one of the hardest segments for you in the entire game. Up to the water room, of course, because it forces you to learn the game. And then obviously this isn't even mentioning like the evolution of the gameplay throughout the game, where you get more guns and you get more weapons and you see more enemies. That all, like, the guns all have different ways of taking down enemies and different specialities. The enemies evolve to where you have the God of War Garradors that are blind, and the way that enemies interact and the way they gain weaponry throughout the game all culminates in it just having such a fruitful evolution throughout it. And I feel like Resident Evil 4 is a game that I don't have really much to say on because it's just pure glaze. I mean, like I said a little bit about Resident Evil 1, but this game is just a lot less. And that's just because what is there to say about Resident Evil 4 that hasn't already been said? And my views on Resident Evil 4 also just is pretty much the same as everyone's. Like, oh yeah, the game's perfect. There's some flaws here and there. And the pacing is the game is a little bit too long, right? The island, when Ashley gets kidnapped by the bugs and gets sent to the island, it's like, okay, guys, what are we really doing here, right? So, oh, hi, Cat. Yeah, I know, the way the game evolves, the series, whoa. I wanted to make sure the cat did not stop the recording. Yeah, I mean, the way it just evolves the series is just phenomenal, and I love the grenades. I just love the areas, and the way that every single boss is like comes in kind of quick succession but feels impactful. El Gigante feels impactful. Del Lago feels impactful. Menendez feels impactful, right? Salazar is one of my favorite villains in the entire series. Your left hand comes off, and the when Leon throws the knife into Salazar's left hand, that it's just like almost perfect, right? It's so cheesy, but it's so good. I will say Ashley's character could be a little bit better, of course. I mean, the way she's portrayed is just kind of annoying. I didn't find her annoying, but when I look back at it, I'm like, okay, she could be a lot better. Same with Luis. He could be a lot better, and how they handle his character just isn't that good. But I mean, overall, I love how they portray Ada in this game too. The main villain, Sadler, is kind of just like, okay, out of all the bosses and villains in this game, he's probably the worst. Just because it's just like, you fight El Gigante, and I went through all the bosses, and you even have like Krauser, who's excellent, by the way. The knife fight is awesome, and then his actual boss fight later on is just awesome. You fight all these bosses, and then Sadler's just like some giant thing with, oh shoot, the eyeballs. And not only that, Sadler, I feel like, doesn't have much to do in this game, and I wish he was fleshed out a little bit more. I think it's funny how all the files in this game is like, oh, we're gonna kidnap Leon at this location. That's just, it adds into the funniness, and I just love, like, oh yeah, pick up a chicken egg, use it. Oh wait, there's a snake. And the art style of this game works just to be perfect. I mean, everything's perfect, and then it doesn't stray away from horror segments. When it gets dark outside, that is inherently scary. It adds a next level of fear to the game. Then you get to the Regenerator section and the It boss fight towards the end of the game, and it's like, wow, this is phenomenal. This is scary. What am I, like, wow, that's like some of the best horror in the entire series right there. And the way it's able to manage all these genres works in favor of this game so well. And like I said, it's like, this Resident Evil 3 is flawless. Resident Evil 1 Remake, I have one flaw with. This game, it's perfect, it just goes on slightly too long. That's really it. That's, everything else is just like nitpicks, in my opinion. And this kind of brings me straight into Resident Evil 4, where I also want to mention, Resident Evil 4 has some of the greatest soundtracks in this entire series. Serenity is probably my favorite song in the entire series. Resident Evil 4 Remake. They took... Cat, come here, Cat, you okay? She's climbing up on there, I don't want her to fall. Cat, you okay? Okay. Resident Evil 4 Remake. They took a break after Resident Evil Village. Or 8, however you want to call it. I usually call it 8, but Village just popped into my mind, and I was pretty excited for this game, but I would kind of... After Resident Evil 3, I was kind of just like, I didn't know how excited I was for another remake. This game's art style feels a little bit off to me. I cannot tell what it is. And I think it might be just what Resident Evil 2, the issue I had with Claire. Where in Resident Evil 4, it's almost like the whole game, where it's almost like every character feels like ultra like glossy, it feels real and less arcadey than the other games. Like all Resident Evil games, what makes these games pretty much feel like Resident Evil is the arcadey aspects of them. Resident Evil 4 feels pretty much like the least arcadey in the series, in my opinion. And so the game kind of has an off feel to me because of that. And I don't know if anyone else has felt this, but I feel it. And but beyond that, I mean, it's Resident Evil 4 with added levels. The knife in this game adds so much depth to it. I really liked how they didn't cut the entire game like they did in 2 and 3 Remake. Well, most of the game in 2, in the entire game in 3. I like how they took what was given to them and they evolved it in a way that felt good in a remake. I have flaws with this game, and I originally had Resident Evil 4 Remake above 4 Original until recently, where I really took time to break down these games, and 4 Remake does some things I think a little bit worse than the original, while the original has the advantage of redefining the entire genre. The remake is a remake, you know, and therefore I don't think 4 Remake can ever really stand right next to the original just because of that. It's not like 4 Remake redefined remakes. I would probably say like Resident Evil 2 Remake redefined remakes if I had to. No, what am I saying? Resident Evil 1 Remake redefined remakes, right? Because of that, it's just it's always going to be slightly below it to me now, I think. And then just moving on to just like the actual gameplay. The gameplay is fantastic. Everything's probably better. The gameplay feels better because you're not in the tank control environment, depending on the person. I'd have to go back and replay both of these again. I haven't played Resident Evil 4 since like 2020, 2021. I haven't played 4 Remake since it came out. Oh, I forgot to rank this. I would say it's about here. It's Resident Evil 4, of course, but, you know, slightly... What? Hold on. I got you. But it's Resident... Whoa. Wow. Oh, what do you want? You okay? Low-key, I don't even know where I was. But yeah, Resident Evil 4 Remake, again, it has the disadvantage of being placed as just a remake. Overall, I mean, if I had to directly compare the two, the first portion of the game where you get to like Menendez, Del Lago, I feel like Del Lago was a little less impactful in the remake, but I mean, overall it's fantastic. I really like how they make the game almost like when you get past Del Lago, you can go onto the boat and just explore the whole area. I think that is a perfect evolution of RE4. I love how they handle the castle and how they add in like the duel. The El Gigante fight on the castle wall is awesome. I mean, again, it's just Resident Evil 4, but pretty much better, right? But there's some things that bring it down. Like Salazar, I think, is inherently a worse character in every single conceivable way. Salazar, I mentioned he is one of my favorite characters in the original. He is not my favorite character, and probably my least favorite villain in the remake, because he's just I don't know, yeah, I'm fighting George Washington instead of like an infected little kid. It doesn't feel the same, and I think they did fumble Salazar. I mean, overall, moving into just like the extra game modes in this game, like Mercenaries mode is cool, but also just like in the specific save rooms with the shooting range, those are hard as hell, but they're really good and they add so much depth to the game. I'm pretty sure my first playthrough of Resident Evil 4 took me 26 hours just based on game time, but my hours on that it says I have on the PlayStation is 55. Like, this game is even longer than the original, but the pacing feels better. They removed it from the main game. They removed some sections from the main game, such as the big rail car, the ski lift part. And it's like, okay, they removed that. I don't like when they remove things, and we'll get to that later. I think overall Sadler is a little bit better in this game to me. I feel like he has a little bit more. He's a little bit more intimidating. He has a little bit more to do. I like Krauser better in this game, I think, too. Overall, Ashley it's crazy how much better they made Ashley and Luis. Like, both these characters actually feel like real people versus like characters in a video game. Both these characters are done to perfection, and I do not think they could have been done any better. I know they originally wanted Ashley to have like a first, like, be like the intro of the game in like chapter 0 or whatever. I'm glad they didn't, because that would break the pace of the game a lot, in my opinion, and it would also add like a 5-minute section of the game at the beginning that you just can't skip, and it sucks for speedruns. We'll get to that later. But yeah, the way they evolved the characters is great. They did a disservice destroying Ada Wong's voice actress. I say that comes off really bad. I don't like how they replaced her. I think she's the voice actor of RE4 Remake, Ada, who played her in the live action movie. In her voice acting sucks. I do not like it at all, and I think it is a complete destruction of voice for the character. How she's written is perfect. The voice does not fit at all. Her RE2 voice is near perfect, right? I don't think she deserved any of the threats, of course. Like, that's ridiculous to say. The fact that she was given death threats for her voice sucks, and it sucks that we live in a world that if people don't like your voice in a game, you get death threats. That just sucks. But also, I do not like her voice in the game. None of that like that is deserved. But just as a critique, I do not like her voice in the game. And then, I mean, that's pretty much it. I mean, there's not much more to say than they just made Resident Evil 4 but better. Let's move into Separate Ways a little bit. People said that Separate Ways sucked in the original game. I don't think so. I recently went back and played Separate Ways in the original game, and I had a lot of fun with it, and it was great revisiting Resident Evil 4 before I did this ranking. And I really like the Sadler boss fight inside of Separate Ways in that game, where he is so scary in that game. I think I died a couple times fighting him as Ada in the original, and I was just like, oh my god. It's just freaking scary. And I think I remember I was doing El Gigante as Ada, and he died in, I think, like 3 shots. And I think that, I don't know if that was a bug or not. I'm not too familiar with Separate Ways in the original, but that was a little bit weird. Now the remake Separate Ways is a million times better. And it's almost like a separate campaign. I think it took me like 8 to 10 hours to do on my first playthrough when it came out. It's only like $10, right? It is very much worth your money. But the way it takes Ada going, like where Ada was throughout the game, and evolves it to where you fight El Gigante with like grappling hooks, grappling between buildings. That's freaking phenomenal. The fact that they they remove all the cut content they removed is given to Separate Ways, like it and the ski lift section. That's phenomenal. And the fact that they give her own like bioweapon to fight is just awesome. And they put a laser section there too. I love how they reorganized Resident Evil 4 to be simply just better, pretty much. They fixed the pacing of the main campaign, and they added so much to Separate Ways, and it makes the game feel so good to play, really. The game's pacing is phenomenal, much like Resident Evil 2 Remake. It's near perfection. Really don't have much more to say about this game. I mean, I like how they added on to the It boss fight where he has 2 phases. I don't think he had that in the original game. I do wish they had the big section where there's like the separate rooms and you had to drop each room. That's kind of unfortunate, but still, what they did here is incredible. I just have to be completely hurt. And when I'm ranking these games, I'm ranking them based off, yes, favoritism, how I critically view these games. I need to replay these 2 games again, most of all, but I think I probably like this Resident Evil 4 Remake better. But if I'm being real, Resident Evil 4 had so much impact on my childhood and just the gaming atmosphere as a whole. There's a reason this game is known to be top 10 games of all time. It's crazy how the director of 1 struck gold again. It's perfect. I just have to be real though in my rankings with this game. I mean, and then overall, I mean, I think that is Resident Evil 4. I think removing Serenity was kind of a fumble. Not gonna lie, that's my favorite soundtrack in the series, and it's not in 4 Remake. But I mean, yeah. I mean, Resident Evil 4, what more is there to say about it? It's just phenomenal. I would have liked to see more endings in the remake, but there wasn't. And I like how it sets up 5 Remake, which we'll talk about the future of the series towards the end of the video. Alright, moving on to Resident Evil Code Veronica X. I have not played the original Code Veronica, but I played Code Veronica X on my PlayStation 5. I own the PS2 version of the game though, and what I will say is I adore Code Veronica. Code Veronica is extraordinarily difficult, but I love how it expands Claire's character to be greater than she was in RE2 original, and I love just the whole setting of the game. Claire is set on a prison island. Like the first cutscene's crazy action, right? And then you get sent onto like this prison island, and it's so interesting how this island like devolves throughout the game, how things get crazier, how enemies get more apparent throughout the game. You get like the military training base is also like pretty. It's like, wow, this is pretty good. Then you get to the mansion towards the end, I think it's the Ashford family mansion. This is where the game becomes incredible for me, where the atmosphere of this game is unlike any other game. This game's atmosphere is almost like a gothic horror type atmosphere, in my opinion. It's unlike the other games, and the save room theme corresponds with it perfectly. And there's the idea behind like the ash, like you're almost in like a kingdom, I guess. You know, you're dealing with like princes and princesses. That feels like, where you're dealing with the Alyssa Ashford, maybe Alfred Ashford, and I like Alfred Ashford a lot as a villain, and I like how he's, because of everything that has happened to him, he is so just here on this island. And I like the aspect of him cross-dressing. I know people don't like that. I know people find it cheesy, and it was probably really weird at the time this game came out, but I really like that aspect. And overall, I mean, the whole first fifth of the game is really interesting. The Bandersnatches, I hate those dudes. Screw the Bandersnatches. And I didn't mind Steve Burnside. Yes, his voice acting is bad, but what's new? You compare Steve Burnside's voice acting to Resident Evil 1 original. I'm sorry, like they're both really bad. I'm not using this voice acting as a critique besides the modern games. And yeah, I don't know. The first fifth of this game I thought was pretty good. The puzzles so far in this game at this point, it is just you pick up an item, take it across the map. I like the whole beginning segment with like that you can't bring like metal stuff into that one area, and you have to put your items away in that box. That's pretty fun, but the puzzles could be a bit better. And then you get to the part with the Tyrant, where the island like explodes, it goes to hell, and you see the Tyrant, you see Wesker and everything, and you get onto the plane. And this is where I'm going to start ranking this game. This is where I'm going to place my ranking. I adore Resident Evil Code Veronica. I so far have glazed this game, but I cannot put this game above C tier. And it's for very similar reasons as Resident Evil 0, where Resident Evil 0, I love it, but there's issues. Code Veronica takes Resident Evil 0's issues and amplifies them times a million. And it's also, I think Code Veronica came out after 1 Remake, so it really doesn't look that good compared to, like, yeah, this is pretty much the last survival horror game in the series, but the fact that it came out after 1 and 0, graphically it's not that impressive. You get to this part on the plane, and I'm sure everybody knows, where if you do not come prepared to this plane, you are pretty much a soft locked from the rest of the game and need to restart, because this boss fight is so extremely difficult. It is crazy. I had to look up a guide on how to beat it because I thought I was soft locked. This game is already extremely hard, and the fact they put a boss here that nearly soft locks you for the rest of the game, a fifth of the way into the game, is insane. Like, I guess a fifth of the way isn't that bad, but this fifth of the game is like the longest section of the entire game. The rest of the fifths are shorter. I'm just classifying that like that in my head. The fact that you can just soft lock yourself here, it sucks. But the thing is, you can soft lock yourself in a lot of other places of this game, and that is just piss poor game design. I'm sorry. Like I said, the puzzles in this game are not that interesting. The story I love, the atmosphere I love, even like the gameplay I love, but the puzzles suck. I don't like the Bandersnatches because they just throw them out at you too many times, and I don't feel like they're fun to fight. And the bosses in this game, I mean, this one just, the Tyrant just is garbage. I just can't wrap my head around the fact that you can just soft lock yourself in this game so many times, and how this passed just to release. Because I mean, again, moving forward to the second fifth of the game, you get to you're on this plane and it flies. It's like, where is it going? You think that's the end of the game? I thought it was the end of the game when I first played it, and then we flew to Antarctica. I'm sorry. For one, okay, Antarctica is such a unique area for the entire series, and I love the Antarctica section. I love the atmosphere, and I love how it evolves the story. I love how you can see the giant spider under the ice. I love this section of the game. But it is bogged down by horrendous game design. Why do they have a poisonous moth hallway where you can barely shoot the moths? You have limited herbs. Yet the poisonous moths in this hallway, the main hallway of the base that you have to go through multiple times no matter what, has infinitely spawning poison moths. Who designed that? That is one of the worst designs I've ever seen in a game, in a survival horror game. That is so piss poor, and I just don't like it. I do not like that. It's stupid. But I mean, moving on, you get to fantastic game design with freaking Nosferatu. The Nosferatu boss fight is my favorite fixed camera boss in the entire series because of how different and unique it was. The fact that you have the first person aiming with the gun adds a layer of depth to the boss fight, and the boss fight's design is terrifying. The work when you fight it in the snowy blizzard, that's so different for the series. It just sucks that you have to deal with the Antarctica boss fight, and then guess what? You're like, okay, wow, I just beat the Antarctica section. I have to be done with the game. Calling in Chris Redfield, which is the first time Chris has appeared since the first game, which is like, okay, that's dope. When Chris came into this game, I was like, I'm sorry? Excuse me? There's layers to this, right? Then you go through the military ground with Chris. Another fatal gameplay flaw in this game is that whatever you have in your box before the Nosferatu fight carries over to Chris, and whatever you had on Claire does not carry over. But the game doesn't tell you. So you go into Nosferatu bringing in all of your best items, and then you go to Chris and you probably have nothing in your box because you just fought a boss with Claire. And they don't tell you this. They don't hint at it. That is poor game design. And when I had to redo Nosferatu because I almost softlocked myself with Chris. If I did not save where I did and how I did, I would have softlocked myself as Chris, which is the second point in the game where you can softlock yourself. Wow, great game choice, guys. It's stupid. The items should just carry over. They shouldn't stay on one character without telling you. If they're gonna have this, they need to tell you first, because it's mega important to the game as a whole. Because you're entering the second big portion of the game with no guns, and it's not your fault. I don't know. The fact that if the game screws you over and it's not your fault, that is inherently awful game design. And this game does this so many times. Because then you get whatever weapons you have as Chris, you go through the same area again, but it's like broken down. There's a giant worm there, kind of like reminiscent of Gravedigger. Yeah, you go through the same area again, and it's not that interesting. And I think it's Wesker or Alexia that's here, and they send in like these drones that you have to dodge. And dodging these drones in fixed camera angles genuinely sucks and is horrible. I hate the drones. The drones suck. And the fact that when you get spotted by the drones, it summons hunters. But the hunters are poisonous. I'm sorry. Is this one of the worst enemy designs in the entire game? And I was stuck on this section forever, like hours. Because it was so difficult for me to get through as Chris. Then you go to Antarctica as Chris. I actually don't remember this section at all. Low-key, it must have been pretty short. But you go through such garbage game design until you get to the ending where you basically go through Spencer Mansion again. And at this point in the game, you beat Antarctica. You're in the last fifth of the game. I don't even remember where Spencer Mansion even comes up. I don't remember how you get there. So that's just a void in my head. But the game begins switching between Chris and Claire. It's just on a dime. So you never really know who you're going to be and what weapons you need, which also adds on to why that gameplay mechanic is inherently flawed, because you never know what's coming next, and you can't prepare for what's coming next because you're thrown at impossible challenges. Spencer Mansion part is like fine though. The Alexia fight, because I was left with nothing, was nearly impossible, and that's already a hard fight. But that fight is cool as hell. I love Alexia as a character, not as a person. As a character, she is so interesting. Again, Alfred is so interesting, and I love how Wesker plays into the story. And then you have like the whole Steve Burnside section, which is like, I like Steve's character. But then you have more garbage puzzles, like the section where it's like, oh yeah, crush the ball with the crusher. And you have to be like frame perfect to get it without smushing yourself. And I don't think, like the save room is like far back. And it just sucks if you die there, which I died there. And then, I mean, you beat the game, and the final boss is, people say is really hard, and I think it has like 3 or 4 phases. The first phase I didn't have an issue with. The second phase I didn't have an issue with. The only thing I had an issue with, difficulty-wise, was the first person aiming with firing the final shot on Alexia. But I mean, that was it. And I mean, that's the end of the game. And again, I just have to say, like, the story elements, the atmosphere, and the overall just like look of the game, even though it is outdated compared to RE1.0, it looks phenomenal, and the story is great. And unlike RE2, where, you know, the game is too easy, right? There's a lot of things I don't like. RE Code Veronica is just so inherently flawed that I can't ignore its issues, and I'd never want to replay this game ever again, despite me loving everything about it so much. The areas are so interesting. The story is so interesting. The enemies are so interesting. Everything they throw at you is so interesting, but they throw it at you in a way that is designed so horribly. Nothing is really explained in the gameplay side of things. And the fact that you can just softlock yourself a million times in the game is garbage. It's just so unfortunate how this game ended up. And I'm pretty certain, I think Resident Evil 1, Code Veronica, and 4 had the same director. I could be wrong. And I think 4 was the last Resident Evil game he worked on. But it really just makes me wonder, why did Code Veronica turn out so bad? And then unfortunately, Code Veronica did nothing for the series. Like, it felt like a filler game before getting to Resident Evil 4, which is a flaw, I think, with Capcom making this game. You have Resident Evil 2 where you have Leon and Claire, and they split apart, right? And they have 3 where 3 closed out the Raccoon City section. In my opinion, Resident Evil Code Veronica and Resident Evil 4 both deserve the title of Resident Evil 4 equally. There should be Resident Evil 4 and then Resident Evil 4 Code Veronica. There are 2 different games that tell the story of the 4th entry in the series based on different characters, kind of supporting the scenarios in Resident Evil 2. I don't like how Code Veronica isn't listed as a main number title, shafting it to just the dust. Because this game's lore is extraordinarily important for the entire series. It sets up Wesker getting superpowers. It sets up Chris and Wesker having that eternal fight. It sets up so much for Resident Evil 5, but no one played it. Like, I really hope when they remake this game, I hope it's titled Resident Evil 4 Code Veronica. I don't think it will be, but I have hope, because I think the title of this game sucks. And if this game, out of every single game in the series, I would have loved, we'll get into this a lot later, but this game deserves the remake a lot more than every other game in the series, in my opinion. And that's what I have to say about Resident Evil Code Veronica. This game makes me so sad. Moving on to Resident Evil 5. Resident Evil 5 is a game that I have opinions on. Low-key, I do not like Resident Evil 5 that much at all. I played it, I was told not to play it alone, and I didn't. I did the main game with my brother and the DLC with one of my friends. And low-key, I just don't like this game. I think the story is boring. The only significant part about the story, and good part about the story, is the stuff with Wesker and Chris. And I like Sheva too, but that's really it. I like the stuff with Spencer as well. Again, any part with Wesker, Chris, Sheva, and Wesker is like, that's pretty good stuff, but like the other side villains, not good. The gameplay is kind of like watered down RE4 in my opinion, with the addition of co-op, which I guess helps the watered down RE4. None of the areas are interesting, really. I mean, all I think about in this game is there's a desert and then there's temples where African people send down sun rays. There's so much more they could have done with the Africa setting. I would have loved to see cities in Africa. Africa isn't just desert. They fall into like the American Hollywood film vision of Africa, which is really weird. I don't like how Capcom kind of appeals to the American audience like that. I wish they actually showed Africa for how it really is. I mean, yeah, I don't like how there's no save rooms in this game. And it's just like, oh, you end a chapter? Upgrade your guns. I don't like that. I mean, just overall, it's just like, There's like not really puzzles. The game isn't scary at all. It takes out every single horror aspect Resident Evil 4 original had, and it just removes them. And then it introduces enemies just having like guns and ducking and covering like Call of Duty, and that's also bad in my opinion. I don't like that. And then I played the DLC because I played this game like, me and my brother got to like the 5th chapter of the game, or right to the chapter 6, where we go on the boat. and we stopped playing for 4 years because we never really wanted to come back to it. And then we went back and beat it, and I was like, okay, that's like fine. I didn't like the Wesker boss fight that much. It was just so much quick time events, and I don't like that. And I'm kind of tearing this game apart. I went back and I played it again. I did the Lost in Nightmares and the DLC with my friend, and low-key I had a lot more fun with it. But I think I had this game put like such a negative view of this game because I will start playing Resident Evil 5, and then like maybe like 30 minutes in, my mind will just go numb because I'm doing the same thing over and over and over and over again with little evolution throughout the game. The only saving grace in this game is that you can play with a friend. But beyond that, I have to say that's my critique of the game. But this game is why the series continued, which I appreciate it for. This was supposed to be the final chapter of the series. Low-key, this would have been an awful final chapter for the series. I don't think this would have been a good final for the series. I'm going to say it again. The way it handles Jill's character in this game sucks. And it's a shame that she is just completely shafted. And this is the last time we've seen her in the mainline story, canonically. 2009. God, she has not been seen here. By the time she is seen again in a mainline game, it's gonna have been about 20 years. And the fact that even in Resident Evil 5, she's not given anything to do, that's really heartbreaking. But this game, because it's co-op, it sold so well. And it created basically the next generation of the Resident Evil franchise because of its sales. It created Resident Evil 6. And then also, like I said, the stuff they do with Wesker and Chris and their eternal fight and how it affects Chris as a character is excellent. And then also, as much as I don't like the gameplay in this game, the memories I have of me, my brother, and even my friend playing this game are some of the best co-op gaming memories I've ever had. Even if I think it was boring, even if I think that the gameplay sucks, and just the whole game design is just so forgettable. I feel like because of the impact this game has on the series, and because it is so good to play with another person, it's almost like freaking It Takes Two. Like, if you're a couple, play Resident Evil 5. Because you'll have a good time with it. It is a lot of things so wrong, but it had such a massive impact on the series. I mean, this one is what created the division between fans of survival horror and action, but the way that led to where we are now is so important to the history of the series. The Wesker and Chris stuff in this game is phenomenal, and the memories I had playing it are just unreal. This game is probably a low A tier, the lowest A tier, going on to B tier. For now, I'm gonna put it in A tier, and that's pretty much just Resident Evil 5. I mean, it's like I kind of don't have much to say about it, just because like I know I kind of go through the games in chronological order, but I just don't remember this one. I just remember being like, oh well, there's a boss fight in the sand. Oh, I don't remember if El Gigante's in this one. If he is, well, they brought him back. I know they cut a bunch of sections with him. Oh wait, look, the Lickers are back. And like, yeah, like leech bosses, kind of like Resident Evil 0, that you need to kill with fire, that are just like, oh, okay, forgettable. I remember the yacht part a lot, and then I remember Wesker. And that's really it. It's just, again, a watered down RE4. But RE4 is great. And like, RE5 isn't a bad game as much as I just tear it apart. The gameplay is really good. As a Resident Evil game, it's not great, and it is just a watered down RE4, but watered down RE4 is still inherently good, and that's why I think I put Resident Evil 5 at A tier. Moving on to Resident Evil 6, well, I'll just stick it right in B tier. I actually enjoyed Resident Evil 6. It's not the worst in the series in my opinion, I mean, as you can see, but I mean, the game does have a lot of flaws. I mean, it takes everything wrong with Resident Evil 5 and amplifies it to 10. The mixed campaigns don't really work because all campaigns are inherently the same. They try to give each character like specifics, like Leon's survival horror, Chris's bioweapons, Jake's is a pursuer type enemy, and then Ada's is puzzles. But none of that really works because all campaigns nearly feel exactly the same in their gameplay and how they present enemies. Leon's is survival horror, but the survival horror element of Leon's campaign is just him walking around dark hallways for the first 10 minutes of his campaign and then going to an exploding city every 5 seconds. How's that much? Chris's is just like, it takes, oh yeah, well, if Leon's is like action, pretty much just action, Chris's is literally just Call of Duty. And I guess I can go, I just played this one this summer. It was the last one I played before Resident Evil 9 came out, and I guess I'll just do a play-by-play. Leon Chapter 1, I enjoyed. Leon Chapter 2, I enjoyed. Leon Chapter 3 did not. Leon Chapter 4 was awesome. The Simmons final boss in Leon Chapter 5, garbage. I don't really like. I remember there being like a fish section in Leon's campaign that was like pretty cool. It reminded me of a lot of like classic Devil May Cry, because I'm also recently getting through that. I'm on Devil May Cry 4. But like the Simmons boss fight in this game, the dog Simmons, the T-Rex Simmons, and the fly Simmons are all trash. I hate them all. The T-Rex one is actually pretty decent, though I lie. The dog one is trash, and the freaking fly one I just don't like. And I guess I can talk about each of the stories as I go through the campaigns. I mean, that's how I thought about Leon's campaign, just real quick. I don't like how this involves like 2 giant cities just being destroyed. That feels really too high scope for the series, and it makes me really like think like, wow, what are we doing? Because Resident Evil, the first 3 games set up Raccoon City's destruction. Resident Evil 6 having 2 cities just being blown to bits really downplays how important Raccoon City was, despite Leon mentioning it throughout the entire game. Which Leon's character in this game is, I need to save people. I need to save people. Then he saves like maybe 1 person throughout the whole game. Everyone, it's just like a Leon torture. This is my least favorite characterization of Ada Wong in the entire series. Ada's character in this game is balls, and I don't like her design. Leon's design I'm pretty okay with. I don't like Helena as a character either. Yeah, Helena's character is just like nothing, and I think she should have been replaced with Jill. And I think if they remake this game, when they remake this game, she should be replaced with Jill. But yeah, Ada's just so boring. I mean, the whole game revolves her dicking around Leon. They're like, oh look, Leon, I'm here, and then she like doesn't say that. I don't know if she knows she's being cloned, I forget. But the whole Ada clone plot too is just bad. Carla is such a weak villain. They could do interesting stuff with her, which they try to do, but they don't do it well at all. And I guess this takes us right into Chris's campaign, where Chris deals with amnesia, which is one of the stupidest plot lines in the entire series. Why did they give Chris amnesia for literally like 2 hours of game? A little weird. Oh, but he remembers later on. It just feels pointless. It takes you into the flashback. The flashback I hate as Chris. It's just so Call of Duty, and I don't like that in a Resident Evil game. And then all the bioweapons, the way Resident Evil 6 has so many cool enemy designs that are just destroyed because they cannot stop the pace of the game for more than 5 seconds because they think you're going to get bored. It's like ADHD the game. And so they just throw a million new enemies at you throughout the course of the game, and they don't really flesh any of them out, which I hope they do. And then in Chris's campaign, they give every single bioweapon a gun. Oh yeah, here's a cool centipede looking one. Here's a gun. I like how the enemies are kind of based off like bugs despite not being bug-like. I think that's pretty interesting. And the C virus has a lot of interesting stuff that they could do with it in a remake, but they don't do it here. Chris's campaign is kind of one that only gets better. The first chapter is like okay, second chapter sucks, third chapter. The car section in Chris's campaign is balls. Yeah, wow, it's just balls. I hate that section so much. Chapter 4 of Chris with the plane is pretty dope. I like that one. And then chapter 5 with Piers. Piers is a great character. I'm sorry. Like the way they end Chris's storyline is freaking fantastic. You have Carla killing herself, and then Chris never ever figures out that Ada didn't kill his crew. He thinks it's always Ada. That's a huge gameplay flaw, that's a huge story flaw in the game. Like, it sucks. You get no closure because Chris just thinks Ada's evil. How does that take us into the future of the series where Leon and him are best buds? Like, okay. But then you have Leon and Chris meeting in gameplay. That's freaking awesome. I love that interaction, and I wish we got more of that between the two of them. But I wish we got more interaction between all the characters, honestly. Moving on to Jake's, speaking of interaction, this is my favorite campaign. I love the Ustanok. I think Jake and Sherry's campaign is the most focused, and I love the relationship between Jake and Sherry and how they progress over the course of the story. their campaign is very centered on emotions versus Leon's, which is just dicking around with Ada, and then Chris's is just like post 9/11 Bush administration, America war, and Jake's just, I don't know, it feels so centered on emotions of the characters, and I like that. And I actually like Jake and Sherry's story. I love seeing Sherry back here, and I like Sherry's campaign because all the parts that you meet Jake and Sherry are some of like the most interesting parts in the game. And I enjoyed the Chris flashback through Jake and Sherry's campaign more than I did the Chris flashback overall. And like, yeah, I think the Ustanok, people say it doesn't work because it's all scripted, but in the type of game that this is, if we're talking about the evolution of the game, the Ustanok can never be Nemesis, but what it is still fantastic, and I like it a lot. And I think it works for this game. I mean, then you get to chapter 3 with like the really weird lab. I like the really weird lab. I like chapter 2 with the freaking snowy mountain. People hate that. You collect 3 things, but it's so easy, and it takes you like 10 minutes. Like, guys, it's not that hard. And I like the snowy setting too. But yeah, the cool lab is cool, and then you get to like this Chinese Yakuza area, just like this temple-like area, and I think that's pretty dope. The motorcycle sequence is pretty fun. And then the final boss of Jake's campaign, chapter 5 is probably the weakest because I don't care for the sudden underwater military base in China. But you know, their final boss with the Ustanok, Jake and Sherry fist fighting this freaking the Ustanok is fantastic. I love it. Final boss really set in stone. Like, wow, I love this. And then you knock him into lava. Then I think he comes back and both Jake and Sherry like hold the gun and they shoot him. It felt like a good conclusion to both of their story arcs, which I cannot say for Leon and Chris or Ada. Well, okay, Chris had a pretty decent storyline besides the Ada stuff. But yeah, Jake and Sherry's campaign, I like, if I had to rank them, it would be Jake and Sherry, Leon, Chris, and then Ada. All their campaigns. Ada's campaign, I don't even feel like talking about, really. I don't remember it. The puzzles are just mediocre. If you play as 2 players, I guess Agent can't do any of the puzzles, which I don't know why they didn't just make Agent Hunk. Playing as Hunk and Ada would be dope, but they just made it some no-name. I just remember playing as Ada's campaign. If I did not sit through it and beat it in one sitting, I would have never gone back to it. And that sucks because it was just so unfun. And the Ada's final boss is like really cool in design, but the fact that if you shoot the hydrogen stuff before like she overtakes it, she just dies instantly without you actually having to face the boss is like weird. Wow, that kind of sucks. And I don't feel like the game, like I feel like Resident Evil 6's gameplay has almost too many moves that they don't really explain in a good way. And you never really take full advantage of all the moves, your entire moveset in this game, because the game isn't built on tutorial. If the game focused on learning the gameplay, then the game would be a lot more fun because you learn the moveset. Because the game rushes you through into the next action sequence, you don't get that. Therefore, all the gameplay just feels a little clunky, and that sucks. And I also hate how you have to like do multiple segments again. Jake and Sherry, like I said, I love the Chris flashback through their perspective. They bring back the infested chopper from DMC2. That sucks, and you have to fight it twice if you do everything. You have to fight the Usanok boss fight in the plane twice, and I just don't like that. If you play Ada's campaign, you have to fight Deborah twice. And that's kind of just stupid. The game has no dynamics, and if you, depending on the order that you play the game and the story, you can just spoil yourself if you don't do Leon's first. And once you do Leon's, it's like, why do I really need to play the rest of the campaign? Because I'm not really gaining anything from it. And I feel like that was a lot. And now I'm just gonna kind of narrow it down. The Carla, the villains of this game, Simmons, Neo Umbrella, is genuinely the worst Resident Evil story I've ever seen produced in a game. It's worse than Resident Evil 3 Remake story, even though that one's still like balls. It like has, Resident Evil 3 story has aspects of being good, but like this is just like balls. The fact that Simmons, Neo Umbrella is just such a random, cheeky little like ploy, like, oh wow, Wesker's killed in 5, but now we're gonna have the big Avengers level game after Wesker's killed. Like, I know they didn't plan for 6 to be really made because they wanted 5 to end the series, but they kill Wesker and then they're like, oh shoot, we're gonna have a game where everyone's here without the main villain of the series. That's like if they killed Thanos in Thor Ragnarok, and then Avengers Infinity War and Endgame had like just some rando villain. I can't even think of any. That's exactly how 6 feels. Wesker should have been the main villain of Resident Evil 6. Simmons is the worst villain in Resident Evil history. And the fact that his whole idea, from what I got from the game, is he cloned Ada because he was in love with her. He's just a simp. If I remember correctly, when you fight Simmons' dog form, he says, "Ada, I always loved you." And that is the worst line in the entire series. And then Carla just has no character. I mean, I think the clone idea of Ada is cool, and I like how the cloning in the series is very important. Yet none of it's done well here. Simmons just stands to suck. He sucks. So why is this game in B tier? If I just tore apart this entire game, well, I like the Jake and Sterry stuff. The gameplay's not bad. The story sucks. But the overall impact that this game had on the series as a greater whole is why it's in B tier. It is probably a C tier game next to Code Veronica, even though Code Veronica is more flawed than this game is, in my opinion. Gameplay overtakes story. But Resident Evil 6 almost bankrupted the freaking franchise, right? We almost never got anything again from this franchise. But because Resident Evil 6 sucked, Capcom took everything bad about it and reevaluated how they made these games. And then they created Resident Evil 7. Which I'm not going to talk about Resident Evil 7 yet, but my god, like the evolution of their thoughts when making these games is crazy. I have to give Resident Evil 6 credit and put it in B tier because of how monumental this game was for the series in a positive way. Without Resident Evil 6, we would not have everything else that came after. We would not have the modern generation of Resident Evil. And I have to put it here because of that. That's Resident Evil 6, and I guess we're moving on to Revelations right now. But before I guess this is the Revelation segment. At the beginning of the Revelation segment, let's talk about RE5, where Jill and RE5 sucks so much. Jill in RE5 is just like nothing. She's mind controlled, she's tortured, and then you have to pull her breast apart to get the scarab off, unmind control her, and then she doesn't do anything. In the final shot against Wesker, she just stands there in the helicopter and does nothing, and it's Sheva that shoots off the final shot, not Jill, who has history and had battled and been tortured against Wesker throughout the whole series. That's kind of bad game design. Moving into Revelations though. Revelations, I put this game above Resident Evil 6. I don't have much to say about this one. I think the setting is phenomenal. And also Resident Evil 6, I don't like how every single character has a regenerator segment. That's kind of stupid. But Resident Evil 6 has the boat section with Chris and the regenerators, which is really good, which kind of leads into Revelations. Revelations 1, I like how it kind of takes Resident Evil 6, kind of combines it with Resident Evil 4, puts it on a DS, and it's kind of more horror based, and I like that. The enemy design is really interesting. The area this game takes place is just like so interesting. A boat section is so interesting, and I really appreciate it for using a boat as a area. First of all, I am super interested in the Titanic, and when I was younger, I loved learning about the Titanic, and so hearing a boat section in this game, it's just freaking awesome. Oh, I'm sorry, Kat. So I really like the setting. The story just isn't my main issue with this game, and why it's B tier and why it didn't flow well to me. For one, there's one really big okay, Cat, the mouse is not your playground. The one really big flaw in this game for me is the fact that like the game switches around between characters way too often. You go from Jill to Chris to Grinder and whatever his name was to like flashbacks with like Patrick, and it's just way too much for such a short game. And I don't like the episodic format of the game, even though it doesn't really affect it. Same thing can be said with Revelations 2, but it doesn't affect it. It just feels weird, which I get it. This one was a DS game, and this looks phenomenal for a DS game. I played this one on my PlayStation. I low-key, I think I played all these on the PlayStation so far, besides RE2 and RE3, which I played on the GameCube. But yeah, Revelations, overall, the game is just like, it's decent, right? It's nothing more than decent. Just going through what I remember of the game, I played this one last year. The whole first section is pretty interesting. It's very Resident Evil 4/6 based. And for what it is, I like it. And I just remember the first boss sucking though. where the first boss, they throw you in this room with a bunch of enemies, infinitely spawning enemies, and a really cool boss design that I like a lot. But why put any survival horror game with infinitely spawning enemies is inherently flawed. Just like Code Veronica, why? You have limited resources, infinitely spawning enemies makes no sense. But I mean, beyond that, I just remember a bunch of stuff happening. I remember, Chris is in the wrong boat. Oh my god. And I remember clunky underwater sections. The enemy design in this game is pretty decent from what I remember. And so the boss fights after the first one are pretty good. The overall story I think is pretty interesting because this is the only actual time in the series that we see bioweapons being used as bioweapons instead of just like outbreaks. Terrorist groups act, and it also shows like the corruption of the BSAA. It shows Chris and Jill working together for the first time, by the way, which that's awesome. And it shows the corruption of the BSAA, which is an interesting subject, which they flesh out more later on. These weapons are actually used in just regular scenarios, in regular settings, how civilians are impacted by bioweapons. And that's awesome. But it's just kind of bundled in a game that's like not that interesting. Again, the gameplay kind of doesn't evolve past. It's RE4 with some RE6 elements of them telling you where to go every 5 seconds, you know? The puzzles of the game are like, okay, they're fine. The enemy design of the game, I feel like it doesn't really evolve much past the initial enemy. Where you get these like pale, salary, like pasty type enemies. An evolution of the T-virus, which I like. But the enemies never really evolve past that. And I kind of don't like that. Like RE6 has so much enemies in it. At least it makes it interesting. This doesn't. I think they get like shields at one point, and then like some of them like are like archers, but those are literally the only 3 enemies I remember in this game. Besides like in flashback, like there's a lot of hunters I remember, and that's really, I just remember a lot of hunters. But yeah, I don't know. Overall, this game's kind of just like a mixed bag. And it's not because it does anything bad, but it doesn't do anything that good either. It has a lot of great ideas, and it's packaged in just a game that's like decent. Is it better than RE6? Yes. And is it an improvement from RE6? Because I know it came out after RE6. Yes, it is. It's just not memorable. I mean, it's like, oh, I didn't care for Patrick. No. And then like there's that Jessica, I think her name is. Capcom, I'm so glad you got out of like those designs. Deborah and Jessica's designs in these games are genuinely so abysmal. As well as, of course, Jill, RE5, tear her breast apart and pull the scarab off. It's like, I'm so glad they got better at these designs. But what's also a shame about Revelations, these games, is like they set up a lot of ideas. And I'm glad what's set up in Revelations is being looked into more in the mainline games now. But it sucks that it leaves off in a giant cliffhanger with Raymond, yet he's never seen again. And again, it's just like Carlos is never seen again. But yeah, I don't know. I really don't have much more to say about this game, but I do want to talk about the final boss. This game's final boss is hard as hell. I died. It took me like an hour to beat this dude. And the fact that like the game constantly, like it almost like edges you with like, oh wait, this is the final. No. This is the final. Look, there's a giant monster on the edge of the boat. Look, the boat is gone now, you know? You've done the game. And then it's like, wait a minute. Remember the terrorist group? He's back. There's a 3rd boat underwater, and here's the final boss. And dude, if you've watched the Dark Souls boss ranking, you'll know I love the thought of like, if teleportation is done well in a boss, it's awesome. The final boss of Revelations teleports, and low-key, he might be one of the best Resident Evil final bosses in the entire series. And I think judging from all these in gameplay design, he really might be. I actually think the final boss of Revelations is the best final boss of all these games. Mainly, probably competing the most with Resident Evil 2. And I mean that, I'm talking about like Super Tyrant and G4. And I mean that in a gameplay design. This boss is just really fun to learn. It almost feels like a Souls boss instead of just like a Resident Evil boss, which is like, oh, here's a big monster, gun it down. This boss, I actually had to like learn his attacks, what he was gonna do, and then base it around that, which the gameplay isn't really made for that. but I still had a lot of fun with it. I mean, overall, Revelations 1 is just, it's fine. It's really not memorable, but again, there's a lot of aspects I do like about it. Revelations 2 is one of my favorite games in this entire series. I talk about how they never bring back what is said in Revelations 1 setup, but I almost don't mind that because Revelations 2 takes such a unique approach to gameplay and story, where we finally see Claire Redfield after Code Veronica. I'm surprised they didn't just axe her off after this game because of how mid it was. We see Barry Burton with his daughter, and I think Moira is an excellent character. Claire, Terra safe. She's fighting bioterrorism through her own means instead of like Leon, Chris, Jill are like pow pow pow. Jill's less like peaceful. And I like that. It differs Jill, and it explains, and I like how this game explains why she isn't an RE6, which is why Jill should be an RE6 remake. And I just like that differentiation in Claire's character and why she's not shown. And then we have her interacting with Moira, who does not use guns. She suffered a traumatic event with guns, and I like how they evolve this throughout the game. I think every single Resident Evil game is lacking in emotions in the emotional narrative for the player, where even like Resident Evil 3, where there's a lot of elements that create the vulnerability in this game. None of it is emotional for the player or really connects with the player through their emotions. The most one that, out of everything we've ranked, the one that does that best so far is Resident Evil 4 Remake. Resident Evil Revelations 2 tries to have that emotional narrative, which I think works in this game. Because we have Claire and Moira going through Modern Island, like a freshly new island, and the villain is Wesker's sister, bro, Alexia. I love that character, by the way, and I really hope she comes back in one of the new games, I have hope for that now. But yeah, Alexia is awesome, and you have Claire and Moira going through this freaking prison island, which it's weird how 2 out of 3 Claire games, she's in a prison island, and even in Resident Evil 2, there's a prison in the RPD. It's like, okay, well, she loves prison islands, I guess. And you're going through this island with Claire's enemies are really fast and lethal, but then you switch to Barry Burton, which this is the first time you get to play as Barry, and I love Barry's characterization. And you have this little girl, I forgot her name, I think it might be Natalie, where you have, let me look this up. Okay, her name's Natalia, and you have Natalia and Barry going through the island, but like set late, much later than where Claire is. So all the enemies and areas are like dilapidated, slow, and old and broken down. And I think that is freaking awesome. And it really shows the evolution of how this island has gone to freaking hell, even more so than it was when Claire was there. I think that it offers a difference in gameplay where the enemies and Claire's are like, it forces you to think on your feet, where Claire's are quick and snappy and you have to be on your toes, where Barry's are slower and more like almost like Last of Us. It's the best thing I can compare this to is The Last of Us, where it's just a father and a daughter, adopted daughter, pretty much going through a zombie-filled area. And Barry's relationship with Natalia is, in my opinion, perfect, and Claire's relationship with Moira is perfect. There's a dude that's related to Claire that I don't remember, but he's like the middle boss of the game, and I like how if you don't shoot him as Moira in the beginning of the game, that affects your ending. I wish they did that a bit more. How just like Resident Evil 3, how interactivity changes the outcome of the game, and I like how they kind of have that in Revelations 2. I just think all the areas that, again, this game is another one that I need to replay again, even though I played it pretty friggin' recently, about a year ago. I don't really remember a lot of the specifics of the game, unfortunately. But it adds in like throwables, Molotov cocktails. I think this is the first Resident Evil game with crouching, which is really crazy. And it adds stealth combat to the mix. And the enemy designs are pretty unique. One thing I don't like about this game is that the first boss, just like Revelations 1, has infinitely spawning enemies. The reason why this game is not harder is just because I cannot stand that they put infinitely spawning enemies with the first boss. And I struggled a lot with the first boss because of that. That sucks. I don't like that. Overall, I just love the story of this game. I love Moira as a character. I love how they evolve Claire's characterization. I love the final part of this game. And the whole like Claire tower section with Moira towards the end, where you had to go down the tower, kind of relates to Chris's section in RE6 where you're trying to like go around and dodge the giant thing. Both really hard sections. Chris was less hard. Revelations 2 section took me a little bit of time. They're both pretty freaking interesting. It's weird how the final boss of Revelations 2, it wasn't that hard, but I enjoyed the hell out of it. Alexia is such an interesting villain, and I like how this like little witch lady that we see, I think as Barry Burton, is just watered down, broken up Alexia, and she just really needs Natalia's body. And I love the ending of this game where Natalia may or may not be taken over. It adds on to the memory transfer portion of the series, and which is being looked into more within the new entries. And I love that. Resident Evil Revelations 2 is just fantastic. I played it solo, and this is a game I'd really want to play co-op. I would want to play as Moira and with a friend playing as Claire, and I'd really want to play as Natalia as Barry. The fact that Natalia can see the enemies, like the weak spots or like the invisible enemies, but Barry can't, just sounds like so much fun to play as co-op. And I'm pretty sure this game also kind of has the character switching like Resident Evil 0. What I really like about this game is more so than 5 is the game is able to focus on more than one or two characters at once. Resident Evil 5 can only focus on Sheva and Chris because it's only focused on Sheva and Chris. Resident Evil 0 broke through them only focusing on one character when it had Billy and Rebecca. What I like about this game is it focuses on everyone equally. Our Resident Evil 6 tried to give everyone focus, but they couldn't. Resident Evil Revelations takes 4 characters and completely fleshes out their narratives in a way that feels so fulfilling. Revelations 2 is slept on, in my opinion. It is so incredibly good, and it's a game I really, really, really want to replay again. And it's just so different from the rest of them. Revelations 2, it's genuinely just incredible. Is the gameplay as good as 2? Is the story as good as 2? Is everything altogether as good as 4? Not really. But personally, I adore this game. Moving on to Resident Evil Outbreak, the next 2 games are games I haven't officially beaten. The only games I'm ranking that I have not beaten, I have them though, and I have played them. Resident Evil Outbreak is a game that I respect monumentally. I dove straight to playing this game after hearing Alyssa Ashcroft was mentioned in Resident Evil Requiem, and you know, we have Grace Ashcroft, and I know Alyssa is a big part of Resident Evil Outbreak, so I bought the game, I went to play it. This game is so ahead of its time for its online mechanics and how it builds upon the game. For one, the game's graphics are freaking beautiful, but on the contrary, is that every single it's a fixed camera angle game, I think, or it's almost like Silent Hill with dynamic camera angles. But every door you go through takes like a minute to load. That is an inherent gameplay flaw I cannot get past. And then also playing this in the big 2026 without online connections, this game is simply unfun and would take me like 50 hours to actually get through because I simply do not know what's happening. I feel like the enemy AI in this game is not good, and this game keeps you always on your toes because it's based on a timer where events happen over time. The longer you wait, the harder the game gets. But as a new player trying to learn it with a minute-long loading screens, trying to learn the controls without a proper tutorial, it does not work. But when this game came out, I can imagine this game working. If you get set in a lobby with like 4 people who don't know what they're doing, but it's easy to figure out what you're doing with 4 people, that just sounds like a ton of fun. And the way that you can pick your character, the way it evolves the story, and the way you get to focus on all these survivors of Raccoon City and how they are affected by this is awesome. I really don't have too much to say about Resident Evil Outbreak besides it is just A tier. The game is so ahead of its time, yet unfortunately in the modern day, it sucks to play. It's not fun to play. I don't have the time to sit down and learn it, and I can only pray and hope that they release this game on modern platforms. I really don't want a remake of this one. I do not. I really just want this to be released on modern platforms for everyone to experience. The same thing with File 2. I don't know the difference between these 2 games besides this one just being the same game but more. Just more Resident Evil Survivors, I guess. I don't know the difference. And it really sucks that I can't get the full experience of this game. Because of that, it's not, I can't put it in top 3. I can't put it in S tier, but I can appreciate for everything it's done. And plus, I do want to mention Resident Evil Outbreak has the best main theme in the entire series. The main theme for this game, which I'm going to play over the section, is genuinely so incredible. And it's something I listen to just in general. It's the only Resident Evil soundtrack that I actively listen to by myself. And I appreciate that because this main theme is just incredible. I don't have much more to say about Outbreak, but I appreciate it, and I'm really glad they're not afraid to dip into unknown territory to the modern fan base with the newer games. Wow, Operation Raccoon City D tier. I played, I think, chapter 1 of this game. I started playing chapter 2, and the game was genuinely so boring and so horrible to play. It just sucked. And the way they portray the Resident Evil 2 events is garbage. I can't comprehend what they were thinking when making this game. The whole like Birkin section in the beginning sucks. The way they portray Hunk Squad sucks. I like Vector as a character. He seems pretty interesting, but it just sucks. The whole game is just built in a sucky way. The game feels... I played it on my 360. Feels horrible to play, by the way. The animations suck. Like literally, I don't think there's any benefit about this game. I know Nikolai appears like once. That's okay. Resident Evil Operation Raccoon City is a game that is just so bad. It was not worth my time. And I really don't have much more to say about that one. Moving back to the big modern generation of Resident Evil, the game that changed the whole series pretty much, Resident Evil 7. I guess... let me think about where to put this one real quick. I think if I have a little like note list over here, right? And yeah, I do think I agree with what I put before. Where I think I put Rev 2 over Resident Evil 2 Remake because Resident Evil 2 Remake's story is just like balls. And Resident Evil 7 doesn't go any further in S tier. It's the bottom of S tier, but it's above A tier, of course. The game is so incredible. The atmosphere they set up in this game, the unique setting they have in this game, the hillbilly family though, peak. Genuinely peak. The director, I'm surprised they brought back the director of Revelations 1 and trusted him with a full game, but I'm glad they did because his ideas for this story is just so unique and different. The way he perceives how to make the game is different. The first person angles, which I know a lot of people don't like, I think works for Resident Evil 7. Resident Evil 7's story is so focused on the small family, it doesn't even feel like a Resident Evil game until Chris comes in at the end. I like Ethan Winters. I know that's kind of a hot take, but Ethan, I like his whole idea. I understand him, and I understand that they wanted the player to feel like the character themselves. That does not work for Resident Evil at all. But I like the idea of Ethan Winters, and I like him as a character for what he is. He's just given a really poor hand. But yeah, I mean, like the whole intro section is iconic. You get to the diner scene, that's iconic. And then you play some gameplay, right? And you get to the garage scene where you fight the first boss, which is fantastic. And then you go through the whole house. You get the Jack chainsaw fight, again, phenomenal. You get to the bug place with Marguerite, phenomenal. You get to the Lucas section, phenomenal. And then you fight Mutated Jack, which I hate how this boss looks. And then you choose your ending. Okay, let me reel it back. You get to Mutated Jack. Mutated Jack is not my favorite boss. I don't like the Chainsaw Jack. Him coming back after the chainsaw, he's like, okay, cool. His design is just so uninspired and unscary. I don't like it compared to the rest of the game with like Marguerite's freaking Bugussi and Jack just being crazy. And then, I mean, it comes right after the Lucas section too, where Lucas is just a crazy dude. And then you get to this part after the Jack fight, which the Jack fight is fine, where you get to the the start of it, where you pick between Zoe and Mia. And I just don't like how there's no purpose to pick Zoe's ending. There's not, like, it's literally just like, wow, everything sucks and you get so much less out of it. Why give us the choice? You pick Mia, I guess, and then you go to the boat section. The boat section just sucks. And the boat section sucks, and it's only the boat section that sucks, and then the rest of the game is peak. And that's kind of my thoughts overall. I love how this game focuses in on the Baker family, and specifically because the main character takes such a back seat, the Baker family kind of becomes the main character of the game. Jack, Marguerite, Lucas, and Zoe are all pretty much the main characters. And that, I think, is kind of fascinating in itself. How these villains are the characters that we kind of experience the game through versus the main character. And the story of this game is set up to where these are the craziest and most sadistic people ever, but it kind of draws on a fine line, just like Resident Evil 1 Remake, where they are so evil and crazy. But it's on the best line possible, where they are not too far and they are not too little. They are just right. And I love each and every Baker. If I had to do a tier list of like characters, Jack, Marguerite, and Lucas are all like top tier Resident Evil characters, which is crazy that they nailed it with this reinvention of the series. And like the fact that they took everything they learned from 6 and they focused in on just a horror setting for this game is fantastic. The horror in this game is excellent, and it's some of the best in the series. I'm not going to say the best. I think Resident Evil 1 does it a little bit better, and even to an extent Resident Evil 2 Remake. But Resident Evil 7's horror is just so good, and how everything you're doing feels real, and how it's so small scale. Everything feels monumental. When you get your gun, it feels monumental. When your hand gets chopped off and that feels crazy. And then you see your hands back on, it's like, oh wow, okay, that's weird. And I mentioned arcadey art elements. I'd say the reason why Resident Evil 4 Remake is less arcadey than this one, in my opinion, is just because of that you can glue your limbs back on. That's a little out there. I know Resident Evil 4 Remake has like the shooting gallery and stuff, but that's just my personal take. The way it takes the horror setting and adapts it in a modern way, it's just so interesting and unique, and evolves the series into the modern generation. This is what brought the series back to life. This is what really made me enter the world of survival horror, was watching Markiplier play Resident Evil 7. And then since Resident Evil 7 has came out, I don't feel like they've really reached the same high until recently. Resident Evil 7 was just such a unique way to reimagine the franchise so late into it, that it's something I can appreciate. And all like the puzzles they add in are fantastic. The freaking shadow puzzles in this game are some of my favorite puzzles in the entire series, because they're just so different and unique. And then moving on to just through the game, the little like tape segments are really interesting too. And just the enemies, the molded, the basement section, they're just so different. The molded are scary because you know those are humans that the Baker family literally just kidnapped and infected. That's scary. That could be you. It just makes it so different. And then you get like the four-legged molded. That's interesting. And I like how they do that. And not to mention the Baker family themselves. Resident Evil 7 introduces like the stalker enemy with Jack, even though he's kind of in like one area for like 5 minutes. It introduces it, and it introduces so much to the series that the remakes in every game afterwards take from. And that is fascinating to me. And like I said, the game is pretty much perfect until the boat segment. It's something that it's hard to describe, and everybody hates the boat segment, including me. And it's just that you get to the point of the game where you beat Jack. You literally kill Jack, right? Pretty much the main villain up until that point. And then the game just kind of continues into the final area. And I love the boat setting. It's super interesting, and it does so much for the overall story of the game. Yet the way it's set up is really confusing. It doesn't introduce any new enemies, which enemy variety in this game is really limited, probably more so than every other game in the series, where we have molded, four-legged molded, and then puking molded. That is it. And because the boat section doesn't introduce any new enemies, I think that's one of the reasons why it just feels so blah. There's nothing new to look at. You're just playing more game, and you're getting fantastic story, but it's set up in a way that's just confusing. You play the section as Mia, and the section as Mia is cool. Then you play the section as Ethan. You play the boat later on when it's all abandoned, and it's just so dark, and it's so uninteresting to look at, and it's so confusing to navigate. It just makes the area feel like it drags on forever, despite it being really freaking short. The boat itself is great for the story, but the gameplay of the boat just sucks. And I think that's why the boat is just universally hated. Out of every last area in any Resident Evil game, I would argue the boat is probably the worst in every game, just because it doesn't do anything. It doesn't do anything new. It just helps the story forward. And the final boss I like a lot. I mean, it's less of a final boss and just more like shoot and pray. But the whole last section when you're going through like the mines with Ethan and stuff, and you meet Evelyn. You know, the moment you meet Evelyn, it's just like the whole demeanor of the game changes, and you really, it's like everything clicks. And you see the Baker family before they got infected, and it adds this disturbing emotional narrative to it. Like I mentioned emotional narratives with the Revelations 2. Resident Evil 7 was this close to perfecting it. The only issue is that we don't have a main character that perceives it. The player doesn't perceive it like a main character would. But the Baker family is just so excellent. The fact that they nailed everything I'm saying right now, just shot in the dark, hoping and praying after RE6 and this is what they created, that is fascinating. But everything I said though is still only an A tier game. What really brings this game up to S tier is the DLC, where at the end of the game we meet Chris Redfield with the blue umbrella. BSA is rebranded to the umbrella logo, and we meet Chris Redfield, and then we get a DLC where we play as Chris Redfield and defeat Lucas. Do I wish Lucas was kind of not killed off here? Yes, I do. I wish Lucas was kind of part of the rest of the series moving forward. I feel like the modern Resident Evil story is kind of like since 6. It's set up just like, oh, we have Simmons, who's a one-time villain. The Baker family is all one-time villains. 8 is one-time villains. And then Resident Evil 9 it probably has a one-time villain, and I don't like that. I wish there was more of an overarching character that is in all the games, and I wish it was Lucas. Lucas Baker is so interesting, and I think it's interesting that he's the only really crazy one. He was crazy before he got infected, and I think that is fascinating. They give you this idea, like they give you the way to play as Chris, and he has more bullets, and it's not too action heavy, and the DLC, I'm pretty sure Not a Hero DLC is free. That's awesome. And then they give you End of Zoe, where it explores Zoe's story based off of Mia's ending. And you play as Joe Baker in some of the most fun and interesting gameplay in the entire series, where you're just fisting these dudes. It's awesome, but it's still scary. And then you get the freaking Volume 1 and a banned footage in Volume 2, where you get the one, just based on memory, you get the escape room, you get Blackjack, you get Jack's 55th birthday, you get Ethan Must Die, and then you get that one, I don't know what it's called. You play as Zoe, and you're watching the night your family gets infected. And that one, when I saw that as a kid, I almost wanted to cry. It saddened me so much. And I was like, if I am 20 now, this is 2018, 12 when this game came out, it emotionally affected me. And I think that is still, it says a lot about this game, because none of the other games in the series did that for me. The DLC of this game is genuinely so phenomenal, and it is what elevates it further. It does so much right, and the DLC only amplifies it even further. And that's why Resident Evil 7 lies at S tier. And I talk so good about it and how it has like just a few flaws. Why is it not further? Why is it not at the top of S tier? Why is it still the lowest point in S tier, just above A tier? You cannot skip the cutscenes in this game. That is one of the biggest design flaws in the entire series. In games that are meant to be replayed continuously, you're meant to play Resident Evil and be like, wow, I want to go through that again. Resident Evil 7 does not have that, because you cannot skip the cutscenes. It is the stupidest thing ever. And then mentioning the freaking how in Resident Evil 3 Remake it takes a while to get to the actual game. Resident Evil 7, usually it takes me about an hour to get to the actual Baker household. That is insane. And the whole first hour of Resident Evil 7 is just walking into cutscene triggers, which wouldn't be a problem if you could skip the friggin' cutscenes. This game has like 2 to 3 hours of cutscene, and if you're speedrunning this game, all cutscenes are just dedicated phone time. Like, that is insane that you cannot skip the cutscenes, and it's also insane that they never went back to add the ability to skip cutscenes. If you could skip cutscenes in this game, this would probably be up here with the top in the entire series. But the fact that you can't brings it down almost an entire tier for me, because it's just so stupid. It's such a dumb thing not to include. They want to focus on the first person immersion between the player and the game, but just make it so you can skip cutscenes on a second playthrough, because there's not much different in this game. The replay value of this game is just replaying it again. The second ending does not do much for replay value because it's just worthless. And it's also not canon shown by that into Zoe DLC. It just doesn't work. The whole not skipping cutscene thing, it just sucks. But I mean, overall, the fact that this game was able to do what it did brings it forward to the place it's at now. And I'm so glad this game exists. And I'm so glad it evolved the series further beyond where it was going in Resident Evil 6. And this is why you Resident Evil 6 credit. It's because Resident Evil 6 is the reason 7 exists. If Resident Evil 6 was not made, 7 simply would not exist. It is crazy how things led to where, and I am so glad that this game exists. Moving into Resident Evil Resistance, which I should have probably bundled with 3. Resident Evil Resistance is just like a B tier. I like Resistance a lot, but the game feels really unbalanced to where I like how you can play as all the enemies and stuff. Like, I think that's really fun. And I like how they bring back Spencer as a villain. They bring back Alexia as a villain in this game, which I think is interesting. And there's other characters in there too. But it's just the fact that it always feels very one-sided towards one specific side, where the players either feel super overpowered or the villains feel super mega overpowered, and that is just kind of not good online game design. They knew Resident Evil 3 Remake was freaking balls because they packaged this in with it and they said it was okay. Resident Evil Resistance is its own separate game that would not have sold by itself unless it was like $10, right? I get why they bundled it in with 3, but it does not excuse 3 being so bad. Overall though, I like Resistance a lot. The game's just, it's like a fun little online Resident Evil game, and it's nothing more than that. The game, again, besides balancing issues, the game is just fun. I can't bring myself to bring it above like B tier though. What also bothers me is that like Jill has so many cosmetics in this game that you just cannot get in 3 Remake. I've seen videos of her RE5 outfit in this game, which it looks horrible, but it's still just like, why not put that in 3 Remake? And all the effort that went into Resistance could have went into 3 Remake. So I just don't really get why it exists, but I enjoyed it and I had a lot of fun with the game. But I really think that's it about Resistance. I enjoy how it brings back Spencer and Alexia in the modern light though. Just no one knows who they are. And we finally made it to Resident Evil 8. This is probably the game I am the most mixed on in the entire series. Out of every single game, this is the one I go back and forth on where I should place it and how much I like it. I played this game and I was like, this game is kind of like okay. Like I like it, but I don't really love it. And then little younger me watched Under the Mayo's review of the game, and I was like, it was like I was brainwashed and being like, wow, this game is just garbage and trash. I look back at Under the Mayo and I'm like, wow, this dude's opinions are freaking balls, and he's just actually a hater on everything that's not, shoot, I forget whatever he likes. But there's like one thing he likes, and that's all he likes. That's it. If it's not that, he doesn't like it. So I went back and I played Resident Evil 8 in December, and I was like, okay, this game went from a C tier for me to like a low A tier, high B tier. And then I played Resident Evil 9, and Resident Evil 9 made me like this game a lot less. But then it was literally last night I was reading about Chris's character in this game and how it relates to the movies Death Island, which I have not seen. He's overprotective because of what happened in RE5 to Jill. And I was like, okay, that's kind of cool. So I kind of go back and forth on this game, and I figure I'll talk about it before I really give it a concrete rating, because I don't really know where I want to put this one. Because you're coming off of Resident Evil 7. Now that we have most of the history done, we can finally just talk about the trajectory of the series in chronological order. Resident Evil 8 comes after 7. 7 was great. 2 Remake was pretty good. 3, which just dropped the ball. Capcom, they made 7, which 7 had a set release date. Then they said, oh, you're Resident Evil 2? We also need a set release date for that. We cannot have don't spend any more time on that game. Same thing with 3, and I'm pretty certain So 7 came out in 2018, 2 came out in 2019, 3 came out in 2020, and I think Village was 2021. That's 4 years in a row with constant Resident Evil games. And you can see the diminishing returns in each of those games, how they just kind of get worse and worse and worse. And I'm not saying Village is worse than Resident Evil 3 Remake. Resident Evil 3 Remake is the worst. As a sequel to 7, kind of blows, where they switch up the directors, where the old director just didn't return for 7 because he didn't have any ideas. I'm pretty sure that's what he said. And I get it. So they wanted to make an 8th game, so they get a new director, and this director is focused on bringing the horror out of it because Resident Evil 7 wasn't accessible to all audiences, which is stupid because Resident Evil 7's horror is the best part about that game. And here's where the game is inherently flawed. You're carrying on the story of Ethan Winters in a non-horror based setting, and then they also try to give him character when he wasn't supposed to be given character. And I love the idea of Ethan Winters as a father going through everything he does, but it's just not explored correctly because you didn't have any setup in Resident Evil 7. You kind of just have him here as a character, and it's like, oh wow, this is weird, he's talking. And I like his voice actor too, but they kind of make him like Leon in this game, and I think that's why people hate him. We're in this game, just speaking about, before we get to the ending, we'll go through it in chronological order after this. He's just given so many bad lines that are trying to make him like cheesy, like Leon, and trying to make him likable because they're trying to speed run how much they can make people like this character before the end of the game, which is stupid. They should have given Ethan Winters more time in the series. I think about the line after you beat Lady D, and he says, "You're the one who's cursed." And that is genuinely, besides the Ada, I've always loved you in Resident Evil 6, that's one of the worst lines. That's top 3 worst lines in the series. You're the one who's cursed is garbage. It's no wonder people don't like Ethan Winters, is because they try and speed on his character development and make him almost like a Leon Part 2 without bringing him into the modern day experience. That's Ethan's character, and like the game, and building up to this game, I had before 8 was announced, I had expected them to focus on Leon as a character instead of Chris. I thought they had Chris in Resident Evil 7, and then 8 would focus on Leon, 9 would focus on like Jill, and 10 would focus on like Claire. They didn't do that. They just made it purely about Chris again, and it kind of creates like this Chris fatigue, where since Resident Evil 5, which up until Resident Evil 5, Chris was in 1, and then Code Veronica. So 5 was his 3rd game, right? Not that many games. But then he's in 6, 7, 8. And it's like, that's 3 more games. So he's in, like, what, 6 games in this entire series? In a series with 9 games? That's a lot. And that's just a lot. I was really disappointed to see Chris, but I really liked his design. And I was curious on where they were going to bring his character. And on all the box art, they have Chris having like half wolf, and that's just, they set him up as if he's going to be the villain for the game, and it's just a marketing ploy at the end of the day, because like everyone's like, oh, we know Chris isn't going to be it, but they literally show him half Lycan on the box art, which is stupid. I don't like that. And then moving into the actual game, after we just set the tone, the game starts with, Mia getting executed, which I like that whole scene, and where it eventually leads. I think the idea is pretty interesting, and I like Rose as a character a lot. You get past the house section, and you get this part where you just walk for like 5 minutes. Again, talking about Resident Evil 3, the games need to be starting off quick. I don't know what is like their modern obsession with like Resident Evil 7's intro is like 30 minutes to an hour. Resident Evil 3 is like 20 minutes. This is like 5 minutes of just like walking straight. It's not fun or scary, but you walk through dark woods and it's just like, oh wow, why? I thought you wanted to take out the horror, but there's nothing horror about it. Horror is not scary when you know you cannot die, in my opinion. The moment I figure out I am invincible, it is not scary. Then you go into this part with this beautiful, and I mean beautiful, freaking shot. This Resident Evil 8 is the most gorgeous game in the entire series, even more than Resident Evil 9. It is so pretty. The architecture they have in this game is so pretty, and the shots they have is so pretty. And the first person exemplifies all of this. And then you go into a Resident Evil 4 bit like town square attack, which doesn't work in the first person viewpoint where all the enemies grab you. And I hate the Lycans and how they grab you. I think it is so annoying. And so, yeah, the whole village attack sucks. Then you kind of are put into another just walking forward place where you meet all these villagers and then they just die. And it's like, okay, why? What's the purpose besides just torturing Ethan? It's just Ethan tortured. And there's a fine line between torturing a character and making him go through things and evolve. Ethan has been tortured in Resident Evil 7. He had a happy ending. And then now he's just tortured again. I don't get the purpose of even bringing him back because he got his happy ending in Resident Evil 7. And they're just going to torture him again. I mean, it starts with him getting his freaking fingers bit off. It doesn't glue them back on. So I don't get it. And then all these characters just die for no reason. There's a lot of models you made just to kill off all these characters. And then you're thrusted into the castle about an hour and 20 minutes, and the first real gameplay segment in the game. But yeah, it just and the fact that you're thrusted like into the castle, which is presented in the trailers as like one of the biggest sections of the game, like an hour or two into the game, depending on how far you go into it, it's like, oh wow, that sucks. Not only that, the castle is like an hour long too. The castle is pretty much go into a room, you go into a linear path to find an item, then you bring it somewhere else on the linear path to get to another place, and it's just kind of cutscene after cutscene. And they're going for a more action-oriented game. Yeah, they're trying to stay survival horror, and it doesn't work. They bring in like the Resident Evil 4 inventory, which is, for one, they give you way too much inventory space to where you don't even ever have to think about your inventory in this game, which is stupid. Inventory management is Inventory management is a key part of the series, yet 8 doesn't have any of it, and that sucks. And the gameplay is meant to be actiony, yet in the freaking castle, it's more so survival horror, yet they give you a bunch of ammo, and nothing is really scary about it. So the game is just kind of like tonal shifts of what it wants to be. But it's really pretty to look at. The castle's freaking beautiful to look at. And then you get through the castle, and Lady D was presented as like one of the most important characters in the game. And there's 3 sisters that are really interesting characters. Every time we see a sister after they're introduced, we just kill them. And they're never really explored as characters, so they just feel like there. And that's stupid. Hey, cat. No, she has the zoomies right now. And that's stupid. I don't like that. It just sucks that they introduce so many cool characters and then they just throw them away. Even like this game tries so hard to be Resident Evil 7, but doesn't want to be it at the same time. We literally get the same exact family dinner scene, but with the Resident Evil 8 villains. Instead of focusing and exploring the characters, we just kill them every time we see them, and we don't get any development in any of the villains. I think it's stupid, and I don't like it. And that again, just in the castle, you see Lady D a couple times, and she has no character. And then I think since like she was really popularized by the trailers, some of her line delivery just feels like it's trying too hard to be unique. Where she says "stupid man" thing. That, and it comes off just not good. It doesn't come off as clean or natural. It feels like they added that line to make her quirky and different and make her memorable, but it doesn't work. People only remember her because she's tall, and people think she's hot. I don't think she's hot, by the way. And she just kind of does nothing, and she dies like an hour, 2 hours into the game. It's like, oh wow, that sucks. And that's a fourth of the game right there, done. And then after the castle is when I think the game finally starts getting somewhere. After the castle, you explore the village, and then you go to the dollhouse, which the dollhouse is a cool section. I like it a lot, but it feels so out of place in a game that you're not focusing on horror. You have one of the scariest sections in the series. If the whole game was like more like the dollhouse, then it would feel complete. You know, and I mentioned like having an identity crisis, but I forgot which game I was talking about when I said that. But out of all the games, Resident Evil 8 suffers from having the biggest identity crisis of them all. It does not know what it's want to be, and the director did not know what it wanted it to be, and it's clear in its game design. We go to the dollhouse, one of the scariest parts of the game, a second playthrough, the dollhouse is just the same, and the baby fetus is such an interesting and unique enemy design, yet it's not explored or really given the time to shine because it's literally lasts like 5 minutes. It sucks. And then you go out to the house, you meet Moreau or whatever his name is. You see him for one cutscene, and then he evolves into a big fish, and he gets no character. But this is more of an action segment before you explore the village again, and then you go to the freaking factory, which is more of a horror-based section. They're all so different. The game has so many ideas that each of the game's ideas could be their own game, yet they're not. And it's bundled in with a Resident Evil 4 inventory system that does not work for any of the ideas they wanted to go for. Same thing with the first-person camera angle, where it doesn't work for the Lycan enemies. I like first-person in Resident Evil 7, but in Resident Evil 8, the Lycans, the fact that they grab you from behind and stuff, and you cannot see anything, it just doesn't work for this game. Maybe for the enemies in the castle, but not the Lycans, the main enemy of the game. It works for House Benetivo, but it does not work for Moreau. It does not work for the Factory. It just doesn't work. There's so many contradicting things in this game that don't mesh well, mixed in with a story that's like okay. And then you move on to the Factory section where we meet Heisenberg, the only character that's kind of fleshed out and given a unique viewpoint in the game, where he's like, oh, I want to fight Mother Miranda, but I want to do it using the child. Which I forgot to mention, the reveal that Rose is actually just dismembered is wicked. I like the idea, but I feel like it is just used as Ethan Winters' torture. I also do not like the Duke. The Duke is stupid. It just tries to be Resident Evil 4 without making it unique or meaningful. It just feels like it's trying too hard to be something it's not. And the game's identity is just all over the place. We meet Heisenberg, and I like him as a character. His little metal powers feel a little bit too out there for me in the Resident Evil series. I mean, he's cool, he wants to beat Mother Miranda, but why not have him work with Ethan to beat Mother Miranda, you know? I don't understand the concept of introducing a character with a character that's a villain, but like he wants to fight the main villain. It'd be cool if you and Ethan work together to fight Mother Miranda versus you're like, no, I do not want to use my dismembered daughter to fight Mother Miranda. And he's like, oh, okay. Tries to kill you. And then I'll get into it. The factory section is pretty cool. Surprisingly the best section in the entire game, in my opinion, besides the village. The factory is great, and it's in terms of final areas, saying that is crazy because usually the final areas of the games are weaker. The factory is pretty good. I like it a lot, and the game is very gorgeous to look at, and there's a lot of areas in this game where I'm just like, wow, I just stop and take a second to just take it in because it is so pretty. But just like you get to the factory and then Heisenberg, like, it totally just falls off the rails here, where we meet Chris, and then Chris finally tells us everything that's happening. He appears one other time, and he's just like, Ethan, you shouldn't be here, even though I dragged you here. It doesn't make much sense. And Heisenberg, who's so focused on Mother Miranda, mutates himself to fight Ethan. That does not make sense to me. Why would he purposely mutate himself to fight Ethan, who is not impactful to him in the slightest, and also wants to fight Mother Miranda? Doesn't really make sense to me. And yeah, I mean, we get the reveal of everything with like, oh, that wasn't actually Mia Chris killed, it was Mother Miranda. And I'll get more into Chris's character towards the end of this segment. And then you fight Heisenberg in a really mid-boss fight. Like, it's fun on normal and hardcore difficulty, but Village of the Shadows is just like, holy hell, you gotta be perfect. And it's not fun on secondary playthroughs, in my opinion. Heisenberg mentions the boulder punching joke, and it's just like, okay, it's funny that it's mentioned, but why would he know about that? That's kind of my thoughts. Yeah, I didn't really understand it. Then you get to Mother Miranda, and the whole final segment of the game, I think, is also pretty good. It's kind of a game that gets better as it goes in, unlike other games. Kind of the opposite of other games in the series. But the game still struggles for its identity, and of course it ends with the death of Ethan Winters, where I'm really mixed on Ethan Winters' death. It makes 7, 8, and 9 feel like such a weird way to look into the series, where Resident Evil 8 kind of doesn't do anything for the main series at all. Resident Evil 7 sets up the BSAA being evil, and not telling Chris about what's happening in Resident Evil 7. And then Resident Evil 9 literally evolves the series to the next stage of what it's going to be. And in between, we have Resident Evil 8 that just feels meaningless. What do we learn in this game that we don't already know or can't assume? We know the BSA is trying to clone Chris based on this game, and we learn about Wolf Squad, and that's really it. So this game kind of feels like a spin-off game. Out of all the games that should have been named Code Veronica, this game, Resident Evil Village, Resident Evil 8 should just be Resident Evil Village and remove the 8. Resident Evil 9 should be Resident Evil 8 because this does nothing to progress the story forward. And just and because of the fact that it feels like a spin-off game, it just doesn't feel like it has a purpose in the mainline series, and it just feels so disconnected. If Resident Evil 7 introduced Ethan, and then Resident Evil 8 introduced Grace, and then Resident Evil 9 introduced a different character, it feels like the trilogy has some sort of flow introducing the modern new characters to the Resident Evil series that we can focus on later on, while also including the other characters, where 7 would have Chris and Ethan, 8 would have Leanna and Grace, and who knows what 9 would have in that way, but it doesn't do that. It just feels like a weird middle chapter that they didn't know what to do. And not to mention the gameplay elements are just kind of hit or miss because it doesn't know what it wants to be. Like I mentioned before, the village is the best part, and I love how they add in hunting mechanics in this game, because I feel like that kind of explores a different avenue of Resident Evil, a more open world like Resident Evil experience that is not really shown. I love the hunting in this game. And I love the village, how you keep coming back to it after each area as sort of a hub world. I wish it was a hub world, but they cut things off from you all the time. The moment you get out of the castle, you cannot go back to the castle. You get out of House Benetivo, you cannot go back to House Benetivo. Why do they cut these things off? They cut things off in Resident Evil 4 Remake 2, where once you get to past Chapter 3, there's simply treasures you cannot get. Why? That's so stupid. Why cut things off from the player that don't need to be cut off? It doesn't make any sense. And Resident Evil 8 does this also, and it's stupid. The main reason why I didn't pre-record this and edit everything, and then I record before Resident Evil 9 came out, and then I just recorded it after it came out, just the 9 portion, is because I felt like Resident Evil 9 had potential to change how I view other games in the series based on what it was presumed to be. Yet, it only changed my opinion on Resident Evil 8 because it makes Resident Evil 8 just feel worthless. It makes it feel pointless, and it makes it just feel like the black sheep of the franchise. There's nothing here that really evolves anything. It doesn't know what it wants to be, and the story's just a mess. It paints Chris in such a bad light, and it makes people hate Ethan Winters as a character. People, I don't think they minded him. They just thought he was boring. But in Village, people just don't like him because he's a Leon wannabe. And then they wanted Ada in this game at one point, but they removed her because they thought it didn't fit with their narrative. And it's like, a lot of things didn't fit with your narrative. I would have liked to see other characters in this game in some form. They didn't do it. This game really just should have been a spin-off. And genuinely, because we were in the era of Capcom, just that we need to pump it out. We need to get 2 Remake out. We need to get 3 Remake out. We need to get Village out. It feels rushed. It feels like they didn't have an idea, and it feels like they only made this game just to say that they made Resident Evil 8, and that is it. And then now talking more about the story, Mother Miranda is the second worst main villain in the entire series, probably next to Simmons. Simmons is worse. Mother Miranda sucks. Don't really get her motive, and this is one of the few Resident Evil games where you really don't know what's happening at the end, which says a lot by it. It just sucks. And Mother Miranda also sucks. The designs throughout the game are freaking fantastic, but nothing is done with them. A lot of the boss fights, like Moreau, is decent. Lady D is a mid boss fight, but Mother Miranda is a decent boss fight, and Heisenberg's okay. But I like the Propeller Man too. I like the idea of adding bioweapons in here that aren't just like stalkers throughout the game. I think it adds more flavor to the games. Overall, it ends with Ethan Winters dying. And killing Ethan Winters off feels weird. Again, as a trilogy, 7, 8, and 9 does not work. And I'm forever going to think about this. And it's forever going to bother me a lot that we introduce Ethan Winters then we kill him. And it's just like, well, I thought you were trying to like introduce new characters to the series so we don't focus on the old characters. Maybe Rose can be important later on, but I'll get to that. His death is really great, but this game might have been best served as a Resident Evil like 10. If Resident Evil 9 was Resident Evil 8, then that would feel like it sets up so much more. It evolves from 7. And then if Resident Evil 9 then evolved what not Requiem did, which would be Resident Evil 8 in this timeline, then maybe Village was like kind of like the new modern Resident Evil 4. That would be interesting. And then it could end off Ethan's character without feeling like you just got introduced to him and then killed him. It just doesn't do much for the series, and it's really unfortunate Ethan just got shafted by Capcom, where they don't even put him on the 30th anniversary stuff. And the fact that they never show his face is such a letdown. Why? Show it before he dies. Make him have some sort of emotion. Chris, I talk about Chris being like bad in this game. He is just really bad, where I don't want Ethan, don't be a part of this. Let me not tell you what's going on, which I understand the first part, and I understand why he didn't tell Ethan, because he didn't want his plan to be messed up about trying to assassinate Mother Miranda. And then he gets dragged. What really bothers me, the worst part about it, is the part when you're fighting Moreau, or right before, and Ethan and Chris still acts like a villain. The first part, Chris didn't want his plan to get messed up. Then when you're fighting Moreau, Chris just acts like a villain for no reason, before he finally explains it at the end of the game. Now, I mentioned the Resident Evil movies and how apparently in Death Island, Jill shows like a form of like resistance against Chris, because apparently Chris has become super overprotective since the events of Resident Evil 5. Yet we don't really, because the movies, no one watches the movies, and because they didn't really explore that at all in the game's files or in Chris's character, we come into Resident Evil 8 just thinking that Chris is being stupid. Coming from it with that in mind, if they set this up like this in like 10 and 11, where Chris is actually super overbearing because of what he's been through, then I will inherently like Chris in 8 more. But how they marketed him, how they marketed the game, how this game sets everything up, it just sucks. And even so, like they added mercenaries like I think a week or a couple months after the game came out. Okay, it's fine. It doesn't, again, the gameplay doesn't really work in this game for me. It doesn't feel good. Village of the Shadows, it's an impossible mode that's just not fun. I don't think modes that you need to use extra ammunition and stuff in is good. It just sucks. The fact that you get one tapped in this game, in a game that it's really hard to avoid the enemy grabs, sucks pretty much. Village of the Shadows is a disappointment, and I really wish it was better. It just really sucks. A year later, they gave you the Shadows of Rose DLC, where they make the game third person and they give you third person options. Yeah, it's because the game wasn't made for it and none of the animations are made for it. It feels clunky. The third person feels really cheaply put together, and the DLC also feels cheaply put together. And it also like transports us to like what, 36 or 38, and it implies that Chris is still living and working by that point, which, my god, I really hope that's not the case, because I'm a little bit Chris fatigued right now. We play as Rose, dealing with like the hive mind stuff and her powers, and I really love the story of this DLC, because it emphasizes Ethan's character as a father, which should have been set up over the course of a couple games rather than speed around Village. The enemy fighting in this DLC is quite decent. The puzzles are okay. The part where you get really tiny and you have to avoid the dolls is like, mandatory stealth sections just aren't fun. Like I mentioned in RE2, it would be a shame if they did that again. It's like, oh wow, it's kind of just boring. And because you're so small, they just shrink the character down and make the world huge. The game isn't meant for that, and it looks really off and cheap. The mannequin section with like the Weeping Angel type enemies is pretty awesome. And the final boss against Mother Miranda again is also awesome, because you get to use powers and you don't really get to use that in the series unless your Peter's in RE6. Like I said, the best part about the DLC is the added on story it gives you between Ethan and Rose as a father. And overall, the idea and emotional narrative that they set up in this game is, on paper, this game should be excellent, but it's about half as long as it needed to be to really flesh out a proper identity. And because of that, like I'm talking about this and I'm looking at where I want to put it. And I genuinely have no idea where the game is inherently not bad, but the game also does nothing. It's no secret that after Resident Evil 8, instead of having a game every single year like they were doing, they did a year gap before they released Resident Evil 4. Thank God. And they were able to focus on Resident Evil 4 remake and make it excellent. And then obviously between Resident Evil 4 and Requiem, we have 3 years. And it seems like, based on rumors and leaks, that they finally got their pipeline kind of figured out. So hopefully we won't have to go with the rushed games. But Resident Evil 8 was just kind of like the final straw in this rushed narrative Capcom was setting up. And I think, like, overall, like, if I have to be real, Village is not as bad as Code Veronica because it doesn't do anything inherently awful with its gameplay. It just struggles to find an identity. Therefore, I don't think I can put it in C tier. However, putting in B tier feels too high, and I feel like I would put it at the very bottom of C tier, B tier, and high C tier. Where when I played this game again before, played Requiem, I put it like A tier, high B tier, but because Requiem has it does not reference Village or really interact with that game at all, I feel like it takes me out of Resident Evil 8 even more than I already did. I'm glad I replayed it again because I liked it better the second time, but it still stands as like an inherently flawed game. And I would rather probably go back and replay portions of Resident Evil 6 than I would 8, because at least 6 has more of a visual identity than 8. This just feels like it's doing too much. The game is gorgeous, but at least 6 has a specific style that it sticks to throughout the game, and it has some good story elements. This just doesn't work in the slightest for me, and I think I do have to put Village here for now. Not to mention, this game was supposed to be bundled with Reverse, which Reverse is a game that I played, the open beta, and I'm pretty certain, like, the open beta was like, wow, this game is just an all-out like fight between all the villains and characters in the series. Yet, I'm pretty sure after the open beta, the game like never came out, or if it did, it came out for like a day, because I never ever heard this game mentioned, and it is shut down now. And the game just sucks. I mean, genuinely. Even like before, when I played the beta, like the graphics of the game genuinely were just balls. Like, genuinely, it's like Operation Raccoon City level of the modern Resident Evil engine games. And I don't know how they did it. And that's really all I have to say about it. Just like, it literally barely released. And then moving on to Resident Evil Requiem. God, we finally made it here. I've been recording this about 4 hours straight. I am tired, and I just have to say, Resident Evil Requiem is my 4th favorite game in the series, and it is pretty much solidified as top 4 no matter what. I 100% the game. Yeah, it's been about a week and a half. Very easy 100%. And I figure I'll just go straight into breaking down this game, because it's the same director as Resident Evil 7. And you can tell because of the first person segments are genuinely made to perfection. And what I really love about Resident Evil Requiem is when 8 came out and I played it, what pissed me off the most is that we were left with a 5-year gap between 8 and 9, and that 8 really leaves you with nothing to look forward to. It's like, oh yeah, look, they tried to clone Chris, and that's really all you get. We already knew the VSA was kind of bad. 9 leaves me with so much hope and faith for the series going forward. I am floored at the thought of Resident Evil 10 right now. And moving into just the first part, unfortunately, this game also has like a 20-minute opening sequence that just isn't, like, on replay, it sucks. When you're first playing through the game, it's super interesting. The way the story is built is so cool. And I wouldn't say it's up until you get to the main meat hospital section as Grace that the game actually starts. And replaying it sucks. And I wish there was just like, these games should just have like a skip intro button. I don't know, it just sucks that occurs in this game too. Which Resident Evil 9 just, like, what it does well is it's like Resident Evil 2. where whatever it does well, it does extraordinarily well. But what it does bad is just, it's like, why? Like, come on. We'll just jump into like the narrative switching where we have Grace and Leon, which the narrative switching in this game works. And it works very well. Grace is an excellent character, and Leon, the way they portray him is excellent. I love it, and it's an evolution of Resident Evil 6 Leon. And I really like how they evolve Leon's character in this game. And both of the voice actors for Grace and Leon are genuinely like, these are some of the best voice actors in the entire series right now, in my opinion. Like they're freaking fantastic. I'm not gonna put them at Red Dead Redemption 2 levels, but like they are they're pretty up there, right? Especially Grace. Grace's voice actress is phenomenal. And the Grace gameplay in the hospital, like you go into this hospital and it's so slow paced that the hospital feels massive when it's not. I'll just start with the zombie personalities are genuinely some of the best things they've ever added to the series as a whole. Giving the zombies personalities gives such a different dynamic to the series where you do feel a little bit bad for killing them, but the fact that their personalities, you can interact with their personalities to get either stealth around them and or kill them, is so fascinating of an idea, and it works so well in this section. It's just like the Grace Hospital section is one of the best purely survival horror sections we've ever gotten in Resident Evil. It blows 7 out of the water, and it's definitely very comparable to the RPD in Resident Evil 2 Remake. And like you're collecting organs to put in this body, then the body comes alive. It feels like so raw, so classic Resident Evil. And then this is what I was mentioning earlier, where they introduce bioweapons and giant monsters that aren't just primarily like one. It's not like Nemesis, it's not like Mr. X where they're just like, oh, they follow you throughout the game. And it's not like the freaking propeller dude or other monster, like in Resident Evil 4, it's not like Chief Menendez or Salazar, as those are giant segments in the game that you need to get through, where they're the main villains. Requiem, Resident Evil 9 just brings forth zombies and bioweapons that are just part of the gameplay experience. Chunk is an excellent example of this, where he like the fact that they add in these bioweapons in just specific scenarios add to the puzzle of the game, where Chunk being in that one section changes the dynamic of the whole second half of the hospital, while the singers and the chef in the other half change the dynamic of the other half of the hospital. It works so well to create a dynamic experience in this section. The Grace section is awesome. The soundtrack is awesome. Like the little dung, whatever you see like an enemy and stuff is awesome. Meeting Emily in this section is fantastic. And I love the foreshadowing that the girl is like the sister of Emily. That's visual storytelling right there. That's done so well. Grace's section is awesome. And then the fact that you go into the mine shaft, with Grace, and Leon comes through this area and you kill every single enemy that you didn't as Grace. It feels so good and shows the power dynamic between Grace and Leon and where they are in this series. And then bringing it back all the way to Resident Evil 1 Remake, one of the first games that we talked about on this list, they bring back the Crimson Heads. Like, that is cinema. And that also pisses me off a little bit about Resident Evil 2 more, where they should have brought back the Crimson Heads. It shows that this game is all about showing the mutations of the T-virus and how it's evolved, where we have the blister heads. If you don't shoot a zombie's head off or you use a meta injector on it, it will come back later and stronger, just like the Crimson Heads. This is an evolution of the Crimson Head in a modern Resident Evil game, and I am so extremely happy to see it. And then like the bulldozer section, where the zombies like coming through, and it's like, it doesn't break the horror, it adds to it by giving them human narratives. And it doesn't feel actiony, it still feels scary. And then like we get into the mineshaft section, which mineshaft section, in my opinion, I feel like the girl is too scripted. The girl is almost completely scripted, which on a first playthrough, it's like you don't really notice it. I sort of did towards the end of the mineshaft, and then on the second playthrough, it's like, oh wow, she's really scripted. Shoot. to where she's literally only appears in scripted segments, and it's like that kind of sucks. I love the mineshaft because it sets up the expectation that we're gonna go underground just like Resident Evil 2 and other Resident Evil games, and we're gonna explore the underground area of this section. And it's like, when we went down there, I was like, oh my god. But yeah, I was like, that sucks. Do we really need to explore more underground areas of this? But the mineshaft is different because you just come right back out, for one. And the mineshaft is a purely condensed area that works to support the relationship between Grace and Emily. All the mineshaft does is add on to the story that Grace loves Emily. She needs to save Emily in order to just feel complete after what happened with Alyssa. And I love how they bring back Alyssa and other characters in the series without needing to present them and reinvent them. These characters are just here and living in this world still. And I like how Resident Evil 9 just plays onto that. They expect the players to just know, which everyone knows Wesker. So why they finally reference him in this game, and it's awesome. And the puzzles in the mineshaft section are excellent. The puzzles in the hospital are excellent. But then you get out of there, you meet Harry, which I'm mixed on Harry because I really wish he didn't die. Whenever we get a character that is introduced like this, Capcom just kind of kills them all off. Because we had Marvin, we had Tyrell in RE3 Remake, we had Luis, we had the cop in RE7, the whole village in RE8 pretty much, and then we had this Harry in RE9. I'm like, okay guys, can we make one of them live, please? Can I have some characters get happy endings? Like, it feels a little bit weird. The whole Harry section is just like, oh yeah, run through the lab. A lot of crazy things are happening, right? Victor is blowing everything up. It shows Victor as a series villain, which Victor is a great villain. I love Victor as a villain. He's not up there with like the Baker family or Wesker, but he's definitely a great villain. And then we kind of get to the girl boss fight. The sniper section's kind of, it's like okay. It goes on it's a little too slow for me. The girl boss fight is, in my opinion, the best boss fight in the entire game because it takes the puzzle aspect of Grace and it enhances it into a boss fight scenario that doesn't feel. It's the least scripted girl section, despite having a lot of scripted moments, but it feels tense and it's really fun, especially on Insanity mode where they give you a bunch of Requiem ammo right before this section. I had a blast doing the girl section on Insanity mode. I didn't care for it on my first playthrough, but it was the only boss that was amplified by Insanity mode, in my opinion. And then we get to my favorite cutscene in the game where you get that heartbreaking scene of Grace giving CPR to Emily, praying that she lives, and then she transforms, and then Leon guns her down in front of her, and Grace feels like she is worthless and that everything is her fault. She's supposed to be the key to all this. She does not know her place in all this, and she is just broken. She meets up with Victor, and we get the reveal of Zeno looking so cool, so incredible. My god. The Zeno reveal is awesome, but the entire sequence is awesome. To where then we go back to Leon in Raccoon City. He drives past the Welcome to Raccoon City sign. He drives past the gas station and his Jeep from RE2, and it says Leon, Raccoon City. That like genuinely might be like one of the perfect first halves of any Resident Evil game. That is so insane how they set up everything in the first half of the game and set it up for the next half. Moving on to Leon and Raccoon City, we get the return of the giant spider that they removed in 2 and 3 Remake. I liked seeing it here, but it kind of makes me more pissed off at 2 and 3 Remake. And the spider boss fight's like, it's fine. I'll get to the bosses in more specific, and then we get to the part with the detonator, where we focus so much on zombie personalities in the first half, but in the second half of the game, we kind of lose it a little bit. Not a little bit, entirely. Where all the end sections, the zombies are just, they look the same pretty much. It's like the same 4 models, it really feels like. And it's just like a playground for him to shoot zombies. It's like a watered down Resident Evil 4. And the detonator section feels a little bit too long in my opinion, because it's really fun, but by the time I get to the 3rd detonator piece, I'm just kind of like, God, when will this end? Because they don't do anything to evolve the detonator section further. We get introduced to like the same 2 enemy types for a 3-hour section. That's it. They don't introduce any new enemy types in this section, and I think that kind of makes it so it doesn't flow well. It just feels too long for what it is. Before we get to the motorcycle section, which is literally like, this game is almost a love letter to Resident Evil 6. It's what Resident Evil 6 wanted to be. We get the motorcycle section, that's awesome. I mentioned I hated the Chris car section in Resident Evil 6, but I liked the airplane and the Jake motorcycle part. This is one of the best like on the rail shooters, I guess, in Resident Evil series, where we have Leon on a motorcycle going through Raccoon City fighting zombie dogs and Victor Gideon, but it doesn't feel unfair. They just set it up to where it's purely just fun. In Resident Evil 6 with like the Chris car section, you touch anything, you explode and die, and then you get to start all over, and it's such a long sequence. This game is focused on pure fun and spectacle in this sequence, which is what it should be. And it is fun. I enjoy it, and it's cool, and it's just enough. It's on the fine line where it's just enough to where it's awesome and not too little to where it feels just boring. I will say this section does introduce one of my a lesser favorited line of the series, where he's like, just a few potholes. That line comes off as very bad, in my opinion. I don't like it. That line, it just comes off as unnatural, and it's kind of up there with Ada, I've always loved you, and you're the one who's cursed. It's maybe number 3. I don't like that line at all. It's the only Leon line I don't like in the game. But, you know, we get to RPD, which was plastered kind of all over the marketing for the game. And in my opinion, they kind of gave too much away in the marketing. But I like how it was marketed with, we have Grace. Oh, it's Resident Evil 9. And then they introduced Leon right before the game comes out. Pretty fire. But we have RPD. And I like how RPD doesn't overstay its welcome. And it's just kind of used. People say this game is very nostalgia heavy. But I think everything in the game works to evolve Leon's character and support his character and give him closure and allow him to press forward past Raccoon City. And what's really fascinating about Resident Evil 9 is like people who played the original and or Resident Evil 2. I played Resident Evil 2 7 years ago now, and it was like a great introduction for me into the series. But 7 years ago, I was 13 years old. Going back to the RPD in 9 is pretty much nostalgic for me. And it's crazy how it's nostalgic for people who played the remake and the original, because it's been so long. And it works for everyone because of that. And I like how it doesn't overstay its welcome. They have some Easter eggs here. Like on my first playthrough, I saw tofu. And I was pretty shocked. I was like, that's really freaking awesome. I like little Easter eggs like that. And then I learned how hard it is to actually see tofu. And I was like, weird. I just got really lucky. I know there's triggers for it, but I did just get lucky because I didn't know on my first playthrough. You go up there, you get the jack. We explore RPD as Leon. We get my least favorite section of the game. I've hinted at it throughout the video. They bring back the orphanage section in this game. And the orphanage section in this game sucks. It doesn't really add anything onto the story, and it kind of feels like they didn't know how to pace break Leon's campaign. Where we have the first half of the game, we're kind of switching between Leon and Grace in a pretty decent manner. You know, you want more Leon, but then we get more Leon. We have a really long detonator section, and then Leon's campaign just goes until pretty much the end of the game. And the orphanage section is one of the only points where we break it up. But you play as some random girl named Chloe, and you just run away from evil red-eyed girls. And I really wanted them to bring back the concept art from Resident Evil 2 Remake of the really like messed up, just mangled kid. The kid that was they had experimented on in Resident Evil 2 was in the concept art. I'll put a picture of it up. And I was like, wow, if they bring that back, that would be really sick. They didn't, and we just got kind of red-eyed girls that in stealth sequences that are purely scripted, which sucks. If it was more like based on your own pace, that would be excellent. If it did bring back the concept art from RE2, that would be awesome. But it doesn't. Instead, we get these red-eyed girls who we don't really know what their purpose is. They experimented and cloned these kids, and then they got all evil, but they all look the exact same. So did they just make the same mistake a million times? And then they have bright red eyes, which just takes me out of the gameplay experience. The section's like 10 minutes long. And then you get to the section where it's just like, oh my god, after waiting there forever, it just phone time, right? You get to this section where there's two girls standing in the hallway. It's like, how do I get past them? And you just walk out the hallway and then back in and they're gone. That's kind of poor gameplay design. And you get to the section underneath the ground and it's like, oh wow, this is like, it would have been cool if they showed a younger Chief Irons here or something. They don't. There's a lot of potential to show Raccoon City before it got nuked and before the virus, and they didn't do any of it. We get to the underground part where we see this fire truck just go down the stairs, and you're going down these stairs. I'm like, wow, this is very reminiscent of RE7 beginning when Mia goes up the stairs, and it kind of leads to nothing. The fire truck's there just to be like artificially scary, which sucks. Yeah, it really is just, it feels meaningless. And then the girls all come out and then they don't attack you, and then the section ends. And then Grace passes out, and then, oh, Mr. X is here. In the orphanage section, it really doesn't do anything for the story at all, especially when you learn that the girls aren't even related to Grace. It just feels purposeless, and it feels like filler to the game, and it feels like it's meant to be a pace breaker for Leon. It really just doesn't work for me, and the whole section, if they removed it, I don't know if it would change too much. The Mr. X sequence is a little bit too scripted for me, and then you just go back straight to Super Tyrant. Like they have this tyrant and then he gets blown up, and it's exactly the same mutation as it is in RE2. Just that feels just like reused assets in my opinion. I was really hoping that if we fought Super Tyrant in this game, that it would be the original Super Tyrant from Resident Evil 2, which it would be new for new players and a great callback for old players. They didn't do that. Instead, we get the same Mr. X from the end of RE2 Remake, which I'm like, that sucks. And the boss fight is clunky. We go to the orphanage and then we go down into the plant. We see Plant 43 again, and it's grown so much, and that's really cool to see. A great evolution of the plan. Where are they going to take this? Oh, it's just like a field boss in Elden Ring, pretty much. Not really impactful. You just go into this lab. Oh, I'm in the final area, I guess. And then, oh, is that Hunk? Are we killing Hunk? We don't really say. Okay. I think I killed Hunk. And then you get to the final gray section where go into this part with a bunch of lickers. Let's bring back the lickers. More nostalgia, I guess. It's like supposed to be stealth. None of the enemies in this game react to your flashlight or noise. Besides the lickers. The lickers only react to you when you run. You can walk and be fine. And that's an inherent gameplay flaw. Why give the player the choice to turn on and off their flashlight if enemies don't react to it? Why make the game so focused on stealth if no enemy can hear you? The moment you figure this out, which I figured this out pretty early on into the game, it kind of takes you out of the game and gives, I mentioned before, everything you do should have an impact. None of the major gameplay mechanics have an impact, besides like, you know, the blood collector and everything, but noise and light are so vital to the lickers and the girl, yet they don't do anything. It's stupid. And the lickers are so much less sensitive from RE2. Where in RE2, if you walk, they'd at least go towards you. They don't do that in this game. It just blows. You get to this gray section, go there, get the key, then you go to 2 locations, and then you're done. It's genuinely so quick. Then you're back as Leon in a very short Leon segment, and then that's the end of the game. And I talked very positively the first half, and the second half kind of goes off the rails a little bit. But let's talk about these endings. The Destroy Elpis ending is genuinely one of the worst Resident Evil endings ever conceived. And I don't know why it existed. And I've heard that the director's a troll, but like, my God, genuinely, why have it exist? Genuinely, everyone I know has chosen to pick Elpis first, to destroy Elpis, besides one person. I've talked to about 7 different people. Everyone has chosen to destroy Elpis, and we all watched Leon get his head blown off. And it kind of took us out of the actual ending of the game. I saw that, even when I released Elpis, and I'm like, I'm still the same, because I just watched my favorite character get his head blown off. Don't do that. You could at least have the Destroy Elpis ending involve us fighting Xeno in like a final stand, but they don't, and that sucks. Why didn't they do that? That would have been really cool. If you fought Xeno in the bad ending and you fought Victor in the good ending, that gives a great choice of endings and bosses that you really want to fight. Even if you know Leon's gonna die in the bad ending, it's fine. it's still important to the gameplay experience. And then like the release Elvis ending is just freaking fantastic. The Victor final boss fight is pretty good. I think Leon's parrying in this game needs some work, and the game feel of this game is not good. I got caught on a lot of objects, and the parrying felt a little clunky to me, and it's really shown in Victor's boss fight. And then the second phase being like a reskin of RE3's final boss. Low key, because I hate RE3 so much, I was glad to see it here in a better game. Honestly, in Resident Evil 3, it just felt like an insult. In this game, I was like, oh yeah, that's pretty cool. A different evolution of the Nemesis Parasite. But I honestly just like, when I think of the timeline, I don't think of the remake, I think of the original. So I didn't mind it. I just wish the little mustache. I wish they changed the boss fight so it was less of, oh, shoot the targets. But I mean, the ending's freaking fantastic, and what it sets up is crazy. And the whole game, I'm like, where's Ada? Where's Ada Wong? Give me Ada Wong. And when all the lights went out, I'm like, Ada is coming. And then it was Chris, and I'm like, oh! Chris fatigue is real. I was like, oh my god, it's Chris. I wanted to cry when I saw him. And I'm also really disappointed Grace didn't have any part in that boss fight. I thought phase 2 was going to be a Grace section. Even if you're like moving boxes, I don't care. Give her something to do. It really, for a game that's so focusing on different characters, giving Grace nothing to do in the second half of the game sucks. Especially the final boss, to where it feels like she didn't overcome much. Leon just overcame it for her, if that makes sense. But yeah, I like the ending, and I like the idea that Elpis destroys all bioweapons, and it gets me really curious to see where they're going with that. The fact that they removed all Wesker references in like Resident Evil 2 and 3, and then they bring in Xeno in Resident Evil 9 is just like, it's like Capcom hates Wesker, but they love him. I don't really know, and I think Xeno's gonna come back. My theory is that for the DLC, they're like in the end credits scene, they're gonna like the BSA like found his head, they're gonna memory transfer or whatever, something. I don't know. I could see Hunk also coming back because his body disappears. I think that's Hunk. Everything in this game feels so unceremonious after the second half, where the pacing after the first half of the game is perfect. Second half is really clunky. The detonator section's too long. RPD is honestly too short. Nothing in this game feels like impactful. Plant 43 doesn't feel impactful. Super Tyrant doesn't feel impactful. Hunk doesn't feel impactful. And then the ending's kind of like here and there because of the bad ending. And it also just doesn't feel that impactful because Grace has no part of it. And that's the thing is, and also like all bosses are really easy. And I was really hoping, like this game should have had a hardcore mode in between Insanity because it felt standard mode's too easy and Insanity is way too hard to just be like casual fun. I'm a hardcore guy. Resident Evil 4 Remake, the difficulty is perfect. Casual, standard. Hardcore is for players who already beat the original, and then we unlock professional, right? Which is like their impossible mode if they want to keep doing that. Resident Evil 9 needs a hardcore mode. It really just does. And that's probably my main complaint with the game, is that Insanity mode made me realize how bad most of the boss fights are. The girl's my favorite boss fight because of how it evolved in Insanity mode. But in Insanity mode, Super Tyrant took forever to kill, and his attacks are really clunky, and his animations are really clunky. Titan Spitter has like 2 attacks, so when the boss lasts more than 5 seconds, it doesn't flow correctly. It just feels boring. The plant is the freaking plant. I mean, God, he has 2 attacks. And then Hunk was a bit better on Insanity mode because I could actually, experience the boss. But it was still just like, it feels so unceremonious if they do want to kill him off. And I feel like they didn't specify because they didn't know how the player base would react. They don't want to make anything concrete with it. I don't know how I feel about that. And that's the thing with Resident Evil 9 is everything it does right. I think after coming off of 8, this game gives me so much hope for the future, and I love how it evolves the entire franchise forward and also acts as a requiem to everything else that's come before. It feels like a closing part on the Umbrella section, and now we're finally moving towards a version of the series post-Umbrella focused on BSAA and the connections. That gets me so excited for the rest of the series. I am more excited for Resident Evil 10 than I am Code Veronica Remake. One thing I do want to discuss before the ending of the video is that I want to talk about Leon Must Die Forever. I recorded this video a week after Resident Evil 9 came out, and a lot has happened since in the Resident Evil community, aka Code Veronica Remake got announced. Thank God. It looks so good. But Leon Must Die Forever is something I was really excited for. They shadow dropped it. They were really secretive about it. I predicted it, because in the video when they're talking about the additional content, he was wearing an Ethan Must Die shirt, and I told my doormate, I was like, dude, I know that is going to be Leon Must Die, or something like Grace Must Die. I predicted Grace Must Die. It was Leon Must Die Forever. This mode sucks. It's so easy. There's nothing to it, and they try to make it like a roguelike, but none of the add-ons that they give you feel like enough to warrant it being a roguelike. So it's just kind of like an easy minigame mode where you still have to listen to the story cutscenes. That is awful. And they don't even have the RPD as an area that you can go to fight enemies. That's also awful. Leon Must Die Forever is just like such a rushed mode for this game, and it's kind of not what I was hoping for, given that Resident Evil 7's DLC was so good and so rich. So Leon Must Die Forever sucks, but Code Veronica Remake looks awesome. I guess that is kind of my review of every single game I've played. The only game on this list that I feel like is in the wrong place is Resident Evil Village. I don't know where I should put this game. Even placing it here, this feels wrong. Placing it here feels wrong. Placing it here, low-key, this feels a bit more right. I think we'll do this. I think this is where I'll put Resident Evil 8, and then kind of going into the series moving forward and why I did this ranking the way I did, when I did, because I did my initial ranking and obviously my opinions have changed. I've played a lot of the games and I have played a lot more. I have a lot more opinions, and I've also gone into game development as a major, and I'm pretty excited about that. And I've been studying a lot of horror games and how they work, and I really wanted to revisit this ranking because, for one, I felt like my first one was not good, and after the Soul series ranking, I was like, I have to do Resident Evil next. And I was waiting for 9 to come out because it felt like, since they announced that game, it felt like it was going to be a big closing point for the series, like a big moment in the series. And I'm glad I did, because it felt like that. And I wanted to get this out before the DLC came out because I plan to do a third ranking, a final ranking, like 7 years down the road. Because moving into the series, I'm gonna base off like what rumors and stuff, how I think then the rest of the series is gonna go for the next couple of years. Next year, we're in 2027, Code Veronica Remake, 2028, Resident Evil 0, 2029, Resident Evil 10, 2030, Resident Evil 1 Remake, 2031, Resident Evil 5 Remake, 2032, Resident Evil 11, 2033, Resident Evil Revelations Remake, 2034, Resident Evil 6 Remake, 2035, Resident Evil 12, and Resident Evil 12 is probably going to be like the big conclusion to the entire series. It doesn't need to be like on a yearly basis, but based on the gap that is between Resident Evil Requiem and Village, I feel like what they did is, from what rumors are, it basically says that Resident Evil Code Veronica and 0 are near either complete or near completion. That's 2 years for them to work on 10 in other games. I feel like what they did in the gap between Village and Requiem is they kind of reevaluated how they were making these games and working on these games, to where I feel like we could possibly get a solid yearly schedule for Resident Evil games, and I think we are going to get it until at least Resident Evil 10. And low-key, I'm more excited for Resident Evil 10 now because of Requiem than I am Code Veronica Remake. I'm excited for Code Veronica Remake. I'm excited for 0 Remake. I'm interested in 1 Remake. 5 Remake will probably be great. 5 Remake and 6 Remake have potential to be the best in the series. What I really, really want them to do is, I want them to do a director's cut of 2 Remake and 3 Remake. Where in 2 Remake they fix the story, and 3 Remake they fix the game. And that's kind of my dream scenario for this series. I really hope that they do that. And it is pretty much confirmed that we are getting Code Veronica and Resident Evil 0 remakes. I just want the story to progress forward. The more I look at the remake games, the more I'm just like, yeah, they're good, but Resident Evil 9 just gets me so excited for everything coming forward. And the reason it stands, like, despite Resident Evil 4 Remake kind of just being a better game, probably, Resident Evil 4, the way it handles dual perspectives, dual atmospheres, and multiple genres inside of it, I think is so impressive. And it really set the standard for the series going forward. Resident Evil 9 is pretty much Resident Evil 7 in the modern day. Resident Evil 7, 8 years later. Its impact on the series is crazy. It pretty much popularized the series beyond what Resident Evil was before, and it really sets up the series to just be greater than it has been. There's so many interesting things they can do in the story. I do think Resident Evil 10 will have Jill or Claire with a new character. I think Resident Evil 11 will have Jill or Claire with a new character. Whatever one doesn't get done in one game will get done in the other game. And I think Resident Evil 12 will have kind of be like the RE6 of the modern day. It's going to be like, we have probably 4 campaigns. We have a Leon, Chris, Claire, and Jill. And they each have a partner, which is going to be their modern counterparts. So like we have, maybe Chris may just be alone, but we'll have like Jill and her new character, and then Claire and her new character. In Loki, I think it's going to take place in the White House in Washington, D.C. And I also think, I think they're going to remake Revelations 1 and 2, and I think they're going to combine them into one game, because they're kind of both shorter games, and they don't really need to, they just don't need to be different things. And I mean, I think that's pretty much it. I have been recording for 4 hours and 34 minutes and I am pretty tired. I'm glad I got to do this again though, and I hope you guys enjoyed watching this video. But I mean, this is my opinion on the series. If there's any disagreements, just let me know. If you guys want to hear my opinions on the modern games, because I won't do another ranking of this series until Resident Evil 12 is out. If you guys want to hear my opinions on any of those games, just ask about it in the comments. I'll be like, I'll probably put it in like, I'll comment it, I'll put A tier. That way we can kind of interact and talk about the game a bit more too. But I think that's about it for this video, guys. Thank you so much for watching this video. My voice is destroyed. I am tired, and I cannot wait to see how the series moves forward. Thank you for watching this video, and I'll see you in another video for you. Bye-bye.
Well, I'm not gonna leave your side. I'm gonna sit right here with you.
I guess this is it then.
Europe, Asia, Africa. Chris Redfield, an agent of stars, visited these and all other continents the world had to offer. And yet he's stolen that one man worthy of Claire. You want my sister? You can have her. I left everything you need to get at my place. Now you just have to F her. These words called this man to Chris's house, promising dreams greater than he had ever dared to imagine. This man is known as the Great Leon S. Kennedy. Come aboard and bring along all your Aryan sperm. Together we can become family once you marry her. Leon. Condoms left behind. They'll only slow us down. Your dick will be your guide. Raise the shaft and ease her down. That legendary child at the end of 9 months reveals is only legendary to you to make it real. Through it all the intercourse to the pleasure through Claire's thighs. Know that I will be there to stand by you. So just know you come inside. Come on board and bring along all your Aryan sperm. Together we will become family once you marry her. There is always room for more. If you wanna try for twins. Leon, 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 Leon.